Welcome to another episode of the Game Theory Podcast. I am Jeremiah. I'm one of the two hosts, Jeremiah, and that over there is David.
That's me, David, and this week we're coming at you with Lost in Translation. We're going to talk about video game localization and the way language shapes our brains,
Our brain holes,
our brain minds.
that organ up there that changes our environment and is changed by our environment. I guess some people don't know that, but it's true. Language is kind of a big deal. We had a hard time focusing this one down because, I mean, you obviously know a lot about language, and language is a huge part of psychology. So,
Yeah, we got a couple of cunning linguists here who are going to share what we know.
oh,
Oh,
he can't be stopped. Oh. I was
but
like,
first,
David, don't make those jokes, and he did. He doesn't care.
there's no censor. So the first thing on the list, how was your week?
Uh, um, yeah, just had some meetings and stuff that didn't go so well. So, meh. You find out that you dropped the ball on something that completely sideswiped you, like you didn't even know it was a thing, and they're like, "Oh, hey, remember this thing over here? Like, why I didn't collect it during a certain intersession?" And I was like, "Wait, we have a class. I don't know if you guys had this in college. I didn't. If we did, I didn't know about it in any other college. But there was like an August intersection. It was like a 4-week super intensive class for anyone who completely failed both the regular semester and the summer semesters.
Never heard of that.
Yeah, I think that's an Ole Miss thing because like we have something that's delightful. It's so delightful if you teach
So it's
undergrad.
like a safety net. If you just fail, you can just like have an extra class to make it up.
A third safety net, yeah, because usually people are taking the summer class the first time, and if they fail it, they take the second time because we have 2 summer sessions, and then you can take it a third time. Apparently, this super fast, quick like crash course over 4 weeks, and we have this wonderful thing at Mississippi. It's great. Oh, it's so good if you teach undergraduates. It's called open admission. What that means is you
Everyone gets in.
apply with quotation marks. Yeah, but you get in. You get in no matter what, and it's one of the leading reasons why we have over 80% Greek life. So over 80% of the little people walking around, the little undergraduates so happy in their life,
They're in a frat or a sorority.
frat or sorority. Yeah. And
Wow.
one of our biggest times on campus in the Psychological Services Center, where we do offer services to students as well, is when Rush. Like, Rush is like a tryout, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like a big deal, I guess.
So
But
that's also where they need the most psychological counseling because it just destroys them.
yeah, in the dorms there was like this intervention over the rush week where they said this was last year. They said what was it? Oh yeah, none of the windows open past halfway, and you only make it 2 floors down, so no need in jumping. Like, it's like a big deal here. It's weird. People will apply because they have a better chance of a sorority or fraternity to either Mississippi State or Ole Miss. I hate this place, David. I hate this place. And they
So
come
it's
in,
like it's
and
like
you
a
got
club that's not exclusive and nobody really wants to be there.
yeah.
But you
Yeah,
get
and everybody's just there for the free cookies. That's what it's like. And then anyway, I'm done. Once you're entitled to a college education like that with an open enrollment, I don't know what could be worse because they come in and they just sit there and blank stare you. And then I made a joke. No one cares. Like, I walked into the class and this was for stats. And the first time I taught, and I was like, I go, okay, so everyone's here for Geology 308. This is going to be an intensive on volcanoes, guys. If you are not super interested in volcanoes, then I suggest you probably leave. I waited, and I'm just like looking around, and I wanted to see one panicked face, right? And there were a couple. There was one of these like, and I go, I'm kidding. This is stats, guys. Nothing. Like, there was even a couple of people stifling smiles. They were like,
not even like a relieved chuckle.
yeah, you could see it in their faces, but they wouldn't dare let me know that was a little clever. And then I put like a little, I'm smarmy in general, so like a lot of times throughout the lecture, I would say things like that were kind of like, I was like, and this is how you would find sphericity. Yeah, you don't care. Yeah, why would I tell you that? Because you don't care. And then they were just like a cow chewing cud. They don't give a shit. And half of them are just like flipping through their phones. I'm like, would you guys mind putting your phones up? Half of them do. Half of them don't. And because we owe them a college education, and their mommy and daddy are going to call and let us know that, oh, well, it's open enrollment. You owe us an education. Yeah, we're not allowed to do much, and it's really shitty. Oh, God, undergrads, man. I was one. I get it. But most of them are bad.
I teach at a charter school where there's a waiting list to get in.
Hmm.
and that's the opposite of how students are there. So I feel your pain.
I hate you. But it's okay. At least you live in a hellish nightmare hellhole. All
No,
right.
it's Colorado. Marijuana is legal. We have perfect weather, and the beautiful Rocky Mountains are all around us.
It's awesome. So
It
people
gets
go there to vacation. No one's ever gone to Mississippi ever to vacation.
it gets cold here in the winter. That's the thing.
Oh, anyway, so yeah, and apparently there was this weird third safety net that the faculty knew about and I didn't, and they're like, "Oh, you should have collected from people because you can collect data over that time." And I was collecting over summer, and I was like, "Oh, I had no idea that's a thing." And they're like, "How do you not know? Why don't you just ask?" And I was like, "Well, you are all in psychology. How am I gonna know what to ask about if I don't know that I should be asking about?"
This is a pretty simple brain question.
Yeah, and how do you answer that like respectfully? And yeah, another one was like they started like I started ripping on me about it, and I was like, oh, well, there's this funny thing called positive reinforcement that we all talk about and teach. That's something we should probably be doing right now. Like say, oh, hey, you did great collecting over summer. You got all this information, rather than the one tiny little sliver I didn't catch. And those people are shitheads anyway. They probably wouldn't have showed up. Oh, well.
That sucks.
So that's my diatribe. Welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. Appreciate you listening to that.
Well, I found a couple new TV shows on Netflix I've been watching.
Oh, yeah?
There was one called Wolverine and the X-Men. I've lost track of how many Marvel cartoons there are now. Like I just see them on Netflix. I'm like, is this one I've already seen, or is this one from the 80s? I don't know. So I checked it out, not expecting much. It was actually pretty fun. I watched the first 3 episodes. Like what sold me was in episode 3 they fight Magneto, like the X-Men do. So you have Wolverine leading the charge. And on the way, they're going to Geonosia, right, where he lives.
Mhm.
And sorry, you were stone facing me like a undergraduate right now. I wasn't sure if you could hear me. There it is. There's the
My
face.
phone.
No, they were flying to Geonosia, and they're like, I'm kind of worried about this. Like, Iceman and Shadowcat are talking, and Shadowcat's like, aren't you worried? And Iceman's like, no, man, Wolverine's got Magneto's number. And she's like, yeah, but what about the army? And I was thinking to myself, Wolverine does not have Magneto's number. Wolverine is the worst person to fight Magneto. So they get there, and it's Wolverine, Beast, Kitty Pryde, Iceman, Emma Frost, Cyclops. They're all going up against Magneto. He destroys them easily, like with gestures. Like it was so fun to watch that fight because he's just like toying with them and like because he's in his fortress, it's made completely out of metal, so he's just controlling the entire environment and he just handily defeats the entire X-Men hit team that was sent after him, which was really fun to watch.
Awesome.
He's a villain that makes magnetism into the most overpowered power you can think of, so it's fun to see how creative they get with that.
Well,
And
that's
also started a show called forget something about a horse. It's Will Arnett is a little Netflix original cartoon where he's like a washed-up horse who was like an actor in the '90s sitcoms.
yeah, I saw that. Is it any good?
I don't know yet. I feel like I want to watch it because it's got Aaron Paul, right?
Oh, nice.
It's got Will Arnett. It's got Alison Brie. Like she's in Mad Men. She's in Community. She plays Annie in Community.
Okay, I think I know who that is.
Anyway, lots of actors I like, and the show, it feels like it's trying to be Family Guy too hard, but sometimes it does make me laugh, so I'm kind of sticking with it. It's only 1 season out, so I'm going to see if I like it or not, and I'll get back to you. I'm on the fence. But, oh my god, the season finale for Korra 3 was a couple days ago, season 3 of Korra, Legend of Korra, so good. So good. I know it's Nickelodeon's show, and I talked about this last week, but I'm still just amazed at how good the fight scenes and it's like kung fu, but it's like watching a kung fu movie, right? Like a Bruce Lee.
Mm-hmm.
But every time it punches, fire shoots out his fist, or a blast of air, or rocks shoot. It's crazy. It's really good.
I'm not sold. No. I want to watch it. Maybe I'll watch that soon. I'm still watching Buffy.
You're always up to date on like pop culture.
Yeah. I'm a little behind, but no, just Joss Whedon. Like he's just my man. Gotta hang out with him. So I'm shifting through it. There was some crappy episodes in this season, but it's still just I don't know. I'm trying to get through it because as a Whedon fan, you just can't not watch Buffy. And there's a lot of good to it. It's obviously a very low-funded show, and it was his early work, but I don't know. You gotta watch it. That's like it would be like saying I'm an RPG fan and never touching Chrono Trigger. You just.
I thought you were gonna say Final Fantasy VI.
Yeah, go fuck yourself. That game's not that good. Anyway, no, I'm sure it is, but I have gotten stuck on the this town, like 6 times. The town, right when you meet Shadow, I don't know what to do, And because there's no like nowadays when you log back into an RPG,
There's
you
like a
got-
quest log.
Yeah, a quest log. No, don't have it. So I
You just
keep
walk around
forgetting.
talking to random people, like trying to remember what you were doing there.
Yeah. And then they're like, get this cider over to an old man. I tried to, but he's way too fast. And I was like, fuck you. There's no context clues. I don't know what to do. So,
Oh, you gotta use luck. He's a thief. You gotta steal the merchant's clothes and pretend to be a merchant.
I don't even know what that means. All right, I'll log back in and figure it out. But I have it on my phone, so I pop in for like 5 seconds, just long enough to figure out what I'm doing. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I think I'm doing this. I start walking forever. And then when I get there, I'm
it
like,
doesn't
well,
seem like it'd be a good mobile game because you really want to sit down and play it for a couple hours.
okay, maybe that's my problem. Because
It's-
I'm not getting it. I'm sure it's there. It's a mechanical thing. But anyway, whatever.
So have you seen Hush yet on Buffy?
No, I'm looking forward to it. What season is that?
I don't remember. I just remember I told you that like how that happened, right? Like why I made that episode.
Yeah. Amy came across it too. She was Googling some stuff about like best and worst Buffy episodes because there's been some bad ones.
Yeah, there's been some bad ones. The hyenas.
Oh, God, yeah. And then there's one where the cavemen. Do you remember cavemen?
Yep, the cavemen.
The worst. Anyway, we watched that when I was like, and we don't have time. We don't have a lot of time to watch shows, and we try to watch it together. So I was like, I totally regret spending that time just now. I wish I would have skipped that. But the other ones are really good, so some of them.
Yeah, it's hit and miss sometimes with Buffy.
Yeah, go figure. Yeah. So that's pretty much what's been going on with me. Other than that, I'm still waiting on my computer. That sucks. Still being worked on. It probably fried the shit out of everything in there, so that sucks. That's pretty much it. That, and I went to a kids health fair to promote, our services, psychological services, and psych assessment. And it's funny, mental health, man. It's got such a bad connotation. This lady walks up to me like she's doing drugs. She's dealing drugs, right, in this convention center, right? So we got a little booth set up, right, and I'm standing in front of mine. I'm talking about our services when people come by, and if they're interested. But everybody kind of walks up, hush, hush, and they're like, "Do you guys do marital therapy? Do you guys do marital therapy? Do you guys do that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we do that." And he's like, "How much is it? How much does it cost?" And I'm like, "You can
Can you look somewhere else when you're talking? I want people
Yeah,
to talk.
look at that guy over there. He looks like he has a bad marriage." But anyway, so I'm like, yeah, we do, and we got a lot of experienced people, blah blah blah. And they're like, okay. Another one was like, she walked by and she like slowly slid it like off the table into her little bag, and I was like, "Can I answer any questions for you?" And she's like, "You guys test for ADHD?" I was like, "Yeah, we do. We test for ADHD." And she goes, "Just that one over there, the old one." And she like gestures from her hip, like with her hand, like doesn't even move her arm. She goes, "The old one over there, big brother, we think he might have it." And I was like, "You think he's got the ADD?" Anyway,
Oh, God.
it's funny. All the other booths, it's like health, and they don't care about that. It's like, do you guys sever warts? What about genital warts?
What's your policy on foot and/or genital fungus?
Yeah. Anything similar. It's like something that you get by no true fault of your own. So what the hell? But anyway, I was like, yes. And that's just funny. It felt like a back alley thing the whole time. Next time, I'm just gonna set up a tent, so they can walk in and then answer any questions they might have.
You should provide those little like old-timey brothels where everyone would get like a mask so nobody can see who the other clients are.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to bring this up. I should definitely talk about this.
Yeah, have you been? You have something to tell me, Jeremiah?
Yes. Yes. No. It's the fact that I was on that big podcast.
Yeah. You've been cheating on me with a different podcast.
There's been another podcast, David.
How long has this been going on?
It was just a one-time thing, and it was with a lot of other people too. So.
Oh, well, that makes it better.
Yeah.
But yeah, tell us about this. I actually tuned in, got to hear your sultry tones on on the it's a podcast I'm already listening to, so it was fun to see on it.
Oh, so fun. It's called The Thinking Atheist. I announced it on the page, but it's like it was for one point like I think the #1 atheist podcast or something, and I'm not like an atheist activist at all or anything like that, but they brought me on because it was about skepticism and mental health, and really the skepticism thing was just silly. It was just about mental health. But
Right. Don't you hear when like podcasts will have like a subject that they're supposed to talk about, and they usually just talk about something else and just barely work in that main subject?
I would never be a part of a podcast like that.
That's the worst. Dishonest is what it is.
It's dishonest. It's misleading. But yeah, no, it was really good. First, I was obviously nervous because they get like over 1 million downloads a month, and so I was like, oh no, imagine like 1 million people or something listening to what you have to say, and I was like, don't fuck this up, man, don't fuck this up. So anyway, no, but it went really well. Like as I always surprise myself by how much I know, or not really, but by the questions that people are asking, I guess. the things they're wanting to know are typically aren't like, what's the leading component that works inside of ACT RFT applications, like, and so,
Right, yeah. The superficial knowledge that you don't think about knowing is usually what people want.
yeah, right. Yeah, so it was really good, man. It was really good. People like knocked in questions, and I felt like I could nail each one of them out of the park. They even I was afraid of the phone and conversation. That was nerve-wracking because then that's like there's no prep or anything.
Mm-hmm.
You can't look it up because I got this crazy noisy computer.
Clack, 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 clack. Hold on.
Yeah, I can't be like an internet warrior. So I just had to go from the head. But it actually went really well. They even came in with a stats question. This guy was actually I think he was trying to sound smart because he was like.
The
He was
algorithm question?
Yeah, he was like, well, classifying people through clinical interview, or he didn't say that, but what he said was, there's a better way to classify people, and it's an algorithm. They do them down here in Texas. And I was like, they do them everywhere. But anyway, he goes, they do them down here in Texas, and it turns out it's better than just using clinical judgment or something like that, is how he put it. And he's like, can you want to talk to that? And JT and Michael were just kind of looking at each other like, I don't. But I was like, yes, I do know. So I was able to just knock it out of the park.
Yeah.
It was really awesome. But
nice.
Yeah. So even like the weird archaic questions, I was able to or archaic? No.
Arcane?
Arcane questions, yeah. Crazy questions I could get. So it was good. Yeah, go tune in. It's really good. It's called The Thinking Atheist. The episode is called Skepticism and Mental Health, and I'm on there, which is fun. Also, another announcement. I will be on another podcast called The Logicast. It's through kind of
serial adultery is what's going on now.
Yeah, it was a one-time thing, but I liked it.
Tiger Woods.
Yeah. But I'm still faithful to you.
I was thinking of you the whole time I was on the podcast.
Yeah. It's called Logicast. It's by a friend, Jared Smith, an internet friend. I've never met him in real life, but he seems like a really cool guy. And his name's Jared Smith, and he does the Logicast with his friend Darby, I think. So I'm going to be on there talking about fanaticism, religious fanaticism. It's also kind of an atheist one. I'm not an activist. This just happens to be that, like, in
These are the people who invite you to things.
Yeah, it's like word of mouth kind of thing, I think.
Yeah.
Someone hears it on the podcast and they go, oh, hey, I want him on mine, or something like that.
Yeah. Atheists are big podcasters, but any religious people out there that have a podcast and they want to talk about mental health, Jeremiah will happily go on your show as well.
Yeah, I don't discriminate, and I will talk about what's appropriate there, like so like there are resiliency factors, for being in religion and etc. But
yes, and we're going to be on a podcast later on in September.
Yes, it's gonna be great. I think September 28th, I believe, somewhere around there. But what's that one about?
We will be talking. Is this the one where there's a couple coming up? Is this one where we're meeting the RPG designer? We're talking about RPG design, or?
Yeah, that's eventually what we're gonna do.
Okay.
But this one is like a meet and greet.
Right. We're just gonna meet and greet the hosts.
Yeah. And the podcast it's another atheist one. Sorry guys, disclaimer's already been given, but it's just another person who heard something and knew someone in a certain circle, and so they requested us to be on. But it's about this guy who's making an RPG, and he's supposed to be really mixing things up, but it's not going to release till like December, I think. So he was like, why don't you guys come on before that and talk about what you guys talk about, introduce yourself, see if our audience kind of likes you, kind of thing. So, and they will.
Because we have STYLE, charisma.
Yeah, you thought that one through.
So yeah, lots of cameos and guest stars coming up throughout the rest of this year as we seem to be popular among the people who do not believe in God or gods.
And it just so happens that like a couple of our best friends are atheist activists, and I think that's what's going on.
Yeah. JT's been on the show a couple of times. He's pretty big into that movement.
Yeah, exactly. So we just happen to be tied into those circles. But.
Well, it's funny, though, because then you have religious friends or family who see you like, I'm going to be on this show, and they're like, that's horribly offensive. Don't ever do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. There's been a lot of Facebook activity.
There's a little blowback sometimes with those things, but we don't pick who invites us on things. We will go anywhere.
Yeah, and if they ask me to be on for like some kind of atheist thing, I don't think I would do that. I'm not. That's not my style, and I don't particularly.
It's not really your forte either. You're a specialist on psychology.
Yeah, and I'm also not even technically in that camp. I'm not even technically an atheist, so I was like, probably not. But if they asked me, for mental health, which is what they did, they're like, hey, Robin Williams killed himself. Can we get your thoughts? I was like, yeah, of course. I've got a lot to say.
Right.
So we did address a couple questions of like atheism and mental health, like and how those two intersect. But most of it was just straight up mental health. I mean, so
Right.
pretty rad.
Don't let the title scare you off. It's just more psychology from Jeremiah. Like if you find that boring, then you'd be scared off. But if you find that interesting, tune in. It'll be great.
Yeah, I thought it was fun. Yeah, because I love promoting the science of psychology, and a lot of people don't do that or know that because there's usually people. Okay, so we'll try to get an expert in the field, right? So they get a clinical psychologist, which is fine. But sometimes they're of the older guard, you know, so they just kind of talk about like clinical applications and like soft terms, and I'm like, no, we have an answer for that, you know, and it's in the literature. So I'm glad that I was able to talk about studies and statistics and things, because you know otherwise it's like, yeah, mental health is really prominent, and I kind of feel like mood disorders have something to do with suicide. I was like, actually, yes. Once we've assessed people posthumously after suicide completions, not attempts, 90% of the variance was gobbled up by mood disorders, usually comorbid. So yeah, that's a big deal. That's a huge risk factor. In fact, I think it was 13.42% more, or 13.42 times more likely to kill yourself if you have comorbid mood disorders. So like, it's just nice that you can have numbers occasionally. Because I'm in grad school, I'm able to consume all that literature. I can, you know, it's nice to have that. I think for the public to be able to hear a number rather than, oh, it's more likely. And they're like, well, so is like being alone. And I'm like, not actually. So anyway. Yeah, I like being able to get that out to the public. It's kind of important.
Right. You're big into the stats and the science.
Yeah.
Which, you know, that Venn diagram covers a lot of the, you know, these other podcasts focus on. They like to consider themselves big in the science too, so I can see why they'd want you on.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Our big announcements were, you know, the guest appearances and the fact that you know, I've been watching Buffy. Those are the big ones, right?
Yeah. And I watched a show about a horse I don't remember the name of. So it's like BoJack.
Yeah, it's a
Horseman or horse face or something. Anyway, let's go into recent news.
Yeah. All right, this is recent news. So we talk about what's been going on in the headlines. Yeah. So what have you seen? What's been going on?
Oh well, my nightmares have come to life, and now they are real.
What do you mean?
Okay, so Auckland Bioengineering Institute. These crazy New Zealanders. You think that they just create hobbits and elves and fly the Concords, but no. Now they are creating the end of the world in the form of a machine that can laugh and cry and learn and dream and express its inner responses and how it perceives you to feel. You know, those are all debatable terms, but what they started doing is they have this thing called Baby X. It's a baby on your computer that learns, like they use let's see, they call it psychobiological simulation. So they've modeled how the brain works, and they're trying to replicate that for learning. And so they've got these neural systems and neuroanatomy that lots of neuro stuff. I don't really know the science, though. It looks like they do, though, because this baby is creepy. Like they're teaching it words, and like it's got like a really expressive face, and it's like it does that thing babies do where they get distracted and look around. You're like, hey, no, look at me, and then like it looks back at you, and you're like, what's this word? Puppy, good girl. And then she smiles, like responds to positive feedback. It's like in 50 years, when computer babies have taken over the world, a la Terminator, but like adorable, this is like the day this happened. These will be the traitors to humanity who made this happen.
Take down their names so that in the future someone can come back for them.
These Kiwis,
Determining.
they've ruined everything. But yeah, they're doing facial simulation, biomechanics, where they're like they'll map the face and map the muscles underneath, so like it looks realistic. Like it's got that uncanny valley thing, hardcore, because this baby looks almost real, but there's something slightly off about it. And the closer you get, remember we talked about this a long time ago, the closer you get to that uncanny valley, the creepier it gets.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to see, just Google Baby X or Baby X Auckland. I'm not from New Zealand, sadly, but yeah, you can watch videos of them interacting with it. It's creepy.
Wow.
And interesting.
Why a baby? Why?
Yeah, I don't know. I think they're trying to like maybe because that's where it is as far as like cognitive processes.
Oh sure, but you can make a robot and do that. Like,
yeah, I don't know why they put a baby face on it because it just makes it worse.
Put a person's face. Yeah, look at Benjamin Button. That was a show about a guy who kind of developed backwards, in the sense of physically, but not psychologically and emotionally and stuff. And so the audience didn't have any problem understanding that. You don't need to put a creepy baby face on it. Oh, even a butcher knife too, but it's science.
Yeah, they're working on one. It's the Auckland Face Simulator for like adult faces and stuff to make it like computer animation cheaper. But I guess babies are easier to do, so they just did a baby for the first one. I don't know. It's scary.
Dude,
I hate it.
seriously, New Zealand, fuck you for that.
Yeah, we were fine with you just raising sheep and being beautiful country, but now you're making robot babies, and we're not fine with that.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings was great. You should have stopped there. But yeah. Speaking of computer language and AI and stuff, here's another kind of creepy thing: is somebody made a hard drive in Minecraft. So in other words, an information storage device inside of an information storage device. It's like,
Oh,
yeah, pretty.
now I've seen them make like working primitive computers in Minecraft with like the zeros and ones, like the binary switches and
Yeah.
and whatever else goes on inside of a computer. But this is an actual storage device.
Yeah, and it's huge, but as it has to be, working with what I don't know, simulated 3x3 blocks or something, or 2x2. But anyway, so yeah, it's a lot of that redstone stuff. The redstone acts like wires because it's a signal transfer device, and so it's just like on a hard drive. It's a way for the information to get from here to there, and then storage is just literally just like the old school kind of hard drives where it would flick a switch, and then that meant it's either 0 or 1, kind of, if it's on the right, and then it's a 1, if it's on the left, it's a 0, and you can kind of magnetize those and, that kind of thing, whatever. The point is yeah, they did that here, but it is manual, so, like, it's a hard drive, sure, and it can keep information, you can process letters and numbers and things like that, but, yeah, it takes, like, a while because it is manual, so, whatever. But at least it remembers, and it's there.
That's good.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Pretty strange.
Well, my next bit of news is a bit of sad news. Growing up, did you ever watch Hercules: The Legendary Journey?
Yeah, but Kevin Sorbo.
Yeah, Kevin Sorbo, and there was also Xena, Warrior Princess.
Lucy Lawless.
Any kid of the 90s, yeah, Lucy Lawless remembers those. Well, turns out Kevin Sorbo, he's one of those washed-up 90s actors. He was in a movie recently that wasn't very good, but mostly he's kind of washed up. But turns out he's also kind of racist.
What?
Yeah, you've been following the Ferguson thing. I know you have strong feelings about militarized police and leveling automatic weapons towards crowds of civilians and, things you shouldn't do, things you should probably not be allowed to do.
I don't know why I'm so fired up about it, but I am.
Yeah, it's just one of your little tirades you get on. Civil rights and human liberty.
Science, psychology, and then, not killing people.
So, anyway, Ferguson responds, or Sorbo. Ferguson sounds like a name. It is a name. It's not even one of the friends of the show. But Sorbo responds to the stuff happening in Ferguson. He says, Ferguson riots have very little to do with the shootings of the young men. It's an excuse to be the losers these animals truly are. It's a tipping point to frustration built up over years of not trying but blaming everyone else, the man, for their failures. It's always someone else's fault when you give up. Michael Brown's death will somehow be a reminder to the African Americans. I always thought we were just Americans. Oh well. That their president voted in has only made things worse for them, not better.
Their president? Wow.
Yeah, because only black people voted for Obama. Everyone knows that.
Their president. Wow. That's super racist.
Yes, he did issue later one of those half-assed "I'm sorry" to everyone that got offended apologies instead of "I'm sorry, I said a lot of racist garbage." So yeah, and then he complained about how the media promotes chaos to boost their pathetic ratings. We should shut them all off and watch clips on the internet only when republished under fair use by a conservative media watchdog group. So yeah. Hercules, kind of a race. He's like your racist grandpa now.
Jeez, man, that's pretty shitty. I mean, yeah, I have a problem with the whole race thing anyway. Race has almost nothing to do with it. It's cultural, It's just because your skin is dark doesn't mean you must behave a certain way. There's culture. Just like white people love freaking lattes and it's just being pretentious and pretending to know a lot of things, right? And
stuffwhitepeopleLike.com.
Exactly. Yeah. Stuffwhitepeoplelike.com is hilarious because like you may not know it about our own culture, but you start reading it and you're like, yeah, we do. We like expensive coffee. That's weird. Other people don't do that. And then like yeah, being pretentious, using large words. We love that. We love that shit. Because you can teach that to people of other cultures and they're not necessarily gonna do it. They're like, okay. But anyway, stuff like that. But yeah, part of the culture of you know of African Americans has to do with the fact that they have low socioeconomic scale. I mean, they don't have the time to we like trampolines and pools. Like it's because we can afford them. And that sucks because that's a systemic problem. Like that's something
Right.
we address, which we're trying to.
Yeah, crime rate's way linked to poverty, not so much linked to race. They just coexist.
Exactly. So like when people talk about like I don't like African Americans, I'm like first of all racist, but second of all, why? What are you talking about? What's wrong? Well, because they play loud music. Do all of them play loud music? Okay, so you're bugged by loud music. Then say that. Say I'm bugged by loud music. Guess what? I have some white folks that live right across the way from me, and they play loud music too. So maybe not talk about race and skin color. Maybe just say you don't like people who make loud music.
Yeah, you can't expect much out of Kevin Sorbo. He's been in the news a few times this month, just like spouting off garbage, like this holier than thou stuff about how Hollywood's lost its way and people should follow his example of righteous living and conservative ethics and just a bunch of nonsense. So when he comes right out and just says something truly racist like that and horrible, it's just a little bit of irony dollop on the whipped cream of his washed up career.
That metaphor kind of went to shit, but yeah.
Yeah, it went to shit much like his career. That's a better metaphor. No, like this guy's turning into a bargain bin Mel Gibson. Like he's got all the like Christian crazy like conservativeness and racism, but for like half the price. Like you can get him in your movie for way cheaper. So keep that in mind, Hollywood.
Yeah, you can have them. Well, on a slightly different note, you know how like in Pokemon. So whenever you're in Pokemon, you're playing Pokemon, the Pokemon world, right? The universe.
Yeah. The world I want to live in.
Yeah. They have these kind of like leagues, right? Or like
like gyms.
Gyms, yeah. And they have kind of a what makes one different or similar to another one?
Each gym will have its own like elemental theme. Like you'll have an electric gym and a rock gym and a water gym.
Yeah.
And everyone uses the same Pokemon type as the gym type, so you just go, oh man, I'm going to the water gym, better bring my Pikachu because they're all going to die from a lightning bolt. It seems like a bad plan to organize your gyms by one type.
Yeah, so there's two things to say about that. First of all, they've created these in real life now, which is hilarious. Like, you show up cosplay and everything, right? Because
like you get to wear like the little vest and a hat with like a Pokemon symbol on it.
Yeah, but it's not like they've come up with some new way to resolve combat. They haven't. That you literally just play Pokemon, but you show up in cosplay. And the difference is that to help like control for the fact that why don't people just show up with the legendaries and wipe all these people out? They kind of have a couple rules that that keep it fun, so you can have a theme, which they have themes, and that kind of you have like kind of unique lists that you wouldn't find in more competitive Pokemon. So it's pretty funny. They show up all cosplayed, and then they have these rules.
Do they have like people like hanging around like in gyms who are like they're not gym leaders, but they'll fight you on your way to the gym leader?
I don't know, maybe. Everybody's pretty big on cosplaying in them, so it's pretty hilarious. Which I don't begrudge anyone, playing out their hobbies and getting as nerdy as they want. I think.
Oh man, I would do that if I could find some shorts and a little vest and I had a Pokemon. Like I would go to a gym and I would test my luck. I want that badge.
Yeah.
I want to beat the gym leader.
It'd be hilarious.
Did they give you a little badge when you win?
I don't know. I didn't say anything about that. They were wearing these weird little scarves, but other than that, no.
That sounds awesome.
I know, right? It would be like going to like a lot of things, like a Burning Man festival or something. You go just to experience it once.
Yeah. Right, and I'm like in your 20s when you're in college, you have that kind of hipster thing where you're like, oh yeah, let's just do it because it'd be so dumb, haha, but they really kind of want to do it, but they want to admit that they're having fun.
Yeah.
I'm over that. Like, that just sounds like genuine fun, no sarcasm. I would be there.
Yeah, well, I would definitely go.
20-year-old me would be like, hey, Jeremiah, let's go to that Pokemon thing, man, that'd be so weird.
Wouldn't it be weird? Let's totally get messed up too.
Oh yeah, just to really make it crazy.
How crazy would that be? And then afterwards, we'll like run in dirt or something that will help sell this story to you.
Yeah, and then we'll definitely make fun of it afterwards because it was so gay fun.
Yeah. So speaking of Pokemon, Smash Brothers. I remember you had something to say about that.
Oh yeah. So those of you who've been following Smash Brothers, the one on 3DS is coming out soon. Like I think early October, late September.
Hmm.
And the Wii U one's not coming out until December. And a lot of people are like, well, why not just release them at the same time? Well, they actually um, explained why. The series creator, Masahiro Sakurai, said that the reason that they're staggering them is because debugging is such a huge process for these games that they have to just dedicate all their resources to one and then the other to debug them. Like he gave an example in a previous Smash Brothers game, they found a bug while debugging where if Fighter A, like let's say Pikachu, hits a pill while Captain Falcon and Jigglypuff specifically are also near that pill, the whole game would freeze.
Hmm.
So there's so many different variables, right? Because you have all these fighters, all these items, all these levels, and if like any of those permutations show up, the game will freeze and shut down. And so that's why the debugging process is so long and why they have to stagger the releases.
Wow. Yeah, I can see that. There's a lot of complexity.
Yeah, like we said in our Smash Brothers episode, there's a lot going on, a lot of variables. So that's that. I'm really looking forward to these games, and I will happily buy the 3DS one and play it until the Wii U comes out. So that's fine. Staggering actually helps me because I can actually master one and then move on to the other. Yeah, and afford it if they both came out at once.
Yeah, yeah, that's funny. Blizzard has a stance on that. I've talked about this like publicly a few times because one of their biggest criticisms is they never get things out on time. They do an announcement of an announcement. That's one of their famous things. So they're like, "Oh, we're gonna be talking about something pretty big here in December." Funny. And then, second of all, no one believes the first release date. So they'll be like, "Oh, well, it's December now, and guess what? World of Warcraft 2 this summer!" And everyone's like, "Yeah, okay, all right, whatever." So that's kind of their second thing. So to defend themselves, they just said, no one remembers. They said, okay, so tell us this. When did StarCraft come out? You remember? What month?
Nope. I can give you a year.
Yeah, so a year. And then what about like all the greatest games? World of Warcraft, Warcraft 3, Warcraft 2. When did those come out? And some people can't even give years. And
yeah,
then
I just know years. I had no idea on the months.
Yeah, and so the point is no one really remembers the exact date when things come out. They just remember how great it was and how polished it was. So that's kind of their key.
Yeah, that's fair. I'd rather have something good come out than. That's why the movie tie-in games usually are so bad or so buggy is because they get them rushed to the release date and then they're terrible.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of games coming out, there's first of all, there's Divinity: Original Sin came out, which is pretty cool. We were going to talk about that in Game Experiences because we got a chance to play it. Mm-hmm. And also, there's another turn-based RPG that came out on Steam, and I haven't checked if it's come on Xbox Live or anything yet, but I got my eye on it. I think I'd like to buy it because it's only $13, and it's like a straight-up traditional RPG. It's called Halfway, and it's $13.
Oh yeah, it's like a turn. It's like almost like a Final Fantasy Tactics.
Yeah. Yep, you said the magic word for me.
That one looks really good. I think I want to get it too, actually.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So that's the other announcement from me.
Excellent. Well, I got one more. Speaking of RPGs, this one kind of slipped by without me noticing, sadly. But the new 5th edition Player's Handbook for Dungeons & Dragons has come out.
Oh, it came out.
Generally positive reviews from what I'm seeing.
That's good. I know they were getting back to the old school style. Which would be fun, because I watched a video on that, like this random YouTube thing. Did you send that to me?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, there was one that was talking about like why Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is going to be so great. Is what it was called.
You sent that to me.
Okay, yeah, and it's like this. It's a really cool. It's first of all, it's high production quality. It was pretty cool to watch. Second of all, it explained it like in detail. It's cool. So it's like here's the history of Dungeons & Dragons, and it was like some people sit down in the 1970s and blah blah blah. And the reason why it took off was because of these factors. Well, 2nd edition did this, 3rd edition did this, and then moving forward, here's what 4th edition did, and why a lot of people didn't like it, or why some people did and why some people didn't, and then here's the 5th one and why people are so excited about it. So yeah. It's pretty cool. For those super nerds like us who actually play tabletop RPGs, yeah, that's a big announcement.
Yeah, I feel bad because I've been following it so closely, and then we got Edge of the Empire, and I just stopped thinking about D&D for a while. So It's like I was like, oh yeah, that came out. I was looking forward to that.
Well, it's good. Edge of the Empire. I mean, we played a Star Wars RPG before, but the trick is it was so complex, and we had so much invested in D&D that it was like it's hard to get us to all read the manuals and stuff. But this one is simple
Still
enough.
hard to get us all to read the manuals.
Yeah, but it's simple enough that we can still play.
Yeah, without having to read them all.
Exactly, and it's just so much better to like teach the rules as they go along, like they did. Well, like we gave them praise for in their little introductory module.
Yeah, and I think it's easier to play online when you don't have to worry about maps and figurines and stuff.
Yeah,
It's like
definitely.
one less obstacle.
For show.
Cool.
Yeah, so thanks for sticking with us through the new stuff. A lot of people find that interesting. If you didn't, just fast forward through it. It's okay.
Yeah.
For the one or two of you crazy kids that don't.
We'll never know.
Yeah, we'll never know. That's true. We'll never know. So, yeah, but here's where we are going to move on to gaming experiences. Gaming experiences. This is the section where we talk about our interaction with some games. Just kind of like, because this is kind of how we would talk to other friends of like, if we were talking about gaming, so, like, oh, what have you been playing, kind of thing. So that's literally the answer to this question is this section. What have you been playing? What was it like?
Yeah, what sort of experiences have you had gaming?
Gaming. Yeah, one big one for us is we already kind of spoiled this one, but Divinity: Original Sin.
Yeah, so backstory, we are the worst friends, and our friend JT Eberhard, who's been on the show a couple of times, it was his birthday, and instead of getting him something for his birthday, he bought us all copies of this game so we could play it with him for his birthday. That was our present to him, was allowing him to purchase us $40 computer games and then playing them with him a couple nights. So we are the worst, but it was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel bad too. I mean, I'm a graduate student, and you're like, in
Public schools.
Yeah, public school. Well, yeah, in schools. So any kind of teaching, even professors don't make a lot of money at first, especially. So for some reason, we don't really give a shit about the future generation. But yeah. So he is a like kind of a blogger and an activist. So
Also,
yeah, none of us make a lot of money, so there's not a lot of money and gifts going between all of us. But so that's what made it so sad was because he's like, "It's my birthday. You guys want to play a game together?" We're like, yeah, we could play some Borderlands 2. We beat it like twice. It'd be fun." He's like, or for my birthday, I could spend $160 and buy each of you games. We were like, what? No, JT, don't do that. And we actively discourage
yeah,
him.
I told him, I was like, because he wants people to play with, and I was like, JT, if the game's good, I'll buy it. I'll buy it and play it with you. That's kind of the best I can do. I can't buy it for you, but I can buy it and play it with you, and that's about it. But he's generous to a fault, and so he bought us all copies.
Yeah, exactly. So next thing I know, he's just like, "Hey, Jemima, you know your computer?" And I was like, I am not, but I can be." He's like, "Okay, I bought you 2 copies, send one to Tim." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, JT, I'm so sorry, man. I'm the worst."
Yeah, but beyond the feeling like human fecal matter, how was the gameplay? How did you like it?
Okay, so first I was gonna mention that I had looked it up because I saw it on Steam and I was thinking, oh, I wonder if this is any good, and it got really good reviews.
Really?
Like very high reviews, yeah. And there was one of the editors he's a writer for Polygon, I think, or maybe it's Kotaku or something. One of the gaming sites. They had talked about why it was so good, and it was this like 5-page article, and I was like, I'm not gonna read all that, but good to know. And it also got really good, like 4 or 5 stars everywhere. So I was like, what is this game? So it already piqued my interest. But I went in and played it, and it's okay. I mean, we kind of okay. So it's a 2-player game, and we had 4 players.
Yeah, we didn't actually do the research on that before JT bought everyone a copy.
Yeah. So, but we got a hack and we played it that way. So maybe that's part of it, because you'd have to wait a long time between turns. It is turn-based. So.
Yeah, it's like Baldur's Gate. Is the closest thing I can describe it as. It's like a better graphics Baldur's Gate, but what was interesting about it was things kind of worked the way that you would think they would work. So like if you steal, like if there's a guy and he's like sitting in his house and there's a treasure chest next to him, in most RPGs you just like, hey, what's up, man? You open the chest, take what's in it, and walk out, and he'd be like, hey, see you later, man. Like this time you do that, he gets mad and he'll tell you to stop, and if you don't stop, he might call the guards and you might have to fight the whole town.
Yeah, it's pretty funny that way. But yeah, it's supposed to be the spiritual successor to the Baldur's Gate series. So yeah, it plays just like that. I mean, it's but better graphics, yeah, and cool mechanics too. Like I was
like
first like a fire mage, huh?
Like the physics of the elements and stuff.
Yeah, I was this fire mage, and I saw this Oh yeah, yeah. There was this gas, like some poison cloud, and I was like, what if I could disperse that just by kind of shooting a little flame arrow in it? So I shot it, and yeah, sure enough, it combusted, and cleared the way for us. It was
Yeah,
cool.
and we could set up combos. Like I could do a spell that would chill somebody, and then when he's chilled, Tim would cast the same spell instead of chilling, would freeze him. And then if you cast a fire spell, it would melt him, and he'd be wet, and that's like a condition you can have. And
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's like if they're standing in water, you can throw like a lightning bolt into it and shock everybody. So like all the elements work the way you think they would.
Yeah, and then you can also if you ignite oil, it burns, and the person standing in it burns, which is awesome. But then after one turn, it smokes, just like oil does, lets off that dark smoke, and so it kind of conceals the person. It's pretty
Yeah, so
weird.
then you can't shoot your ranger can't shoot the guy who's in there. So it's
Right.
it's it's kind of interesting that way. Like I'm not sure it might be too much of an RPG for me at this point.
Yeah.
Like I just having to read dialogue boxes again. I know when I was a kid I used to do that all the time, but I'm so spoiled by voice acting now that I'm like, blah blah blah. What's this guy want to say? And every single person has something to say to you. Everyone's got. You can talk to anybody. You can barter with anybody. So you might miss something important because you didn't talk to anybody, which in the '90s was fine because everybody had like a 2 sentence thing to say to you, like, "Oh, times are tough. The Empire is here." But now everyone's got like pages of dialogue to read to. So like I just don't know if I have the patience for that anymore.
And some of it's repetitive, and some of it's actually because one of the things is find out who murdered this one important person.
Yeah, so you're trying to do an investigation.
Yeah, and so you literally would have to talk to every single person in this actually huge town, and
and compare their stories.
but there's also other things you need to figure out. So there's like 6 things you need to question everyone about. Some of them, most people are redundant. They'll say kind of the same things.
Yeah,
Some
like,
of-
oh, I don't know much about that.
and occasionally one person might know something. So you got to click it, go through the whole. It'll be like say so and so continue, so and so continue, so and so end. So they, like 3 boxes of dialogue, massive boxes, and you're just like, I don't fucking care.
Yeah, and if you skim through it, you might miss the one important clue amidst all the blah blah blah.
Yeah, because you get some stupid deckhand who might know the truth, and so you got to go through every deckhand, every guard, and that part was not fun.
It's a weird complaint though, right? Because what we're essentially complaining about is that they've made it too realistic. Like now everybody has things to say, and some of the things that don't matter. Instead of like old games where it's just like blah blah blah. Here's your one line of dialogue.
Right.
Like basically, the RPG has gotten to the point where it's like a tabletop game where every single person can be fleshed out and like talk to, and we just don't want to do it because we don't want to read that much. It's kind of a first world problem of game complaints.
Yeah, well, it is. It is. But I mean, I would say that's a bad DM if we were doing that, and and I was like, oh, I made everyone equally enticing. Instead, you should say something like, it's known that a bar is full of people, but instead what you do is you highlight the people who seem most important. Like the bartender is doing this, and you did this in your Star Wars campaign, and you're like, and there's also, kind of a strange-looking guy in the corner with 2 guys surrounding him, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
It's a wink, obviously, to the crowd, and it's not always true. The inconspicuous people might know the information, but yeah, I don't know. It just speeds up gameplay.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on if you like gameplay or simulation. This stuff, like the simulation, people want every single person to have their own little thing and have to wade through it all. I just never was. Like I always like. Maybe that's why I like 4th edition because I like fun over like simulations, which is how older D&D was. Like.
Yeah.
I don't need a bunch of charts to tell me how many hits it takes to go through a door, depending on what kind of wood it's made out of. Like, I'd rather focus on, like, Edge of the Empire, where we can hand wave a lot of that stuff and just what's cinematic and what's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. You're maximizing your fun there, and that's because you're able to suspend disbelief for a while and say, like, oh, yeah, I can see how that would work. And
right.
move. Yeah.
So that's Divinity Original Sin. We'll play it some more, and we're still kind of new to the game, so I just can't decide if I like it or not yet. I think I do, but I also think I don't.
Yeah, me too.
Like whenever someone's like, "Do you want to play it?" I'm like, "I'm not that excited, but I do want to play a game with my friends, so let's do it."
Yeah, that's how I feel. But we're still kind of like we keep having to restart because there's mechanical crap involved, and like one person can show up and the other 2 can, or just stuff like that. So like we've played the first part 1,000 times now. It feels like. So once we get past that, let's see what happens.
Right. I'll hold off judgment until we get out of that first town.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of Star Wars, one of our listeners recommended a game on the Facebook group called Star Wars Commander. Did you check that out?
No, I wasn't able to. No, my phone charger broke, so me and my wife are using it. So we've been really scarce, alternating. So I've been trying not to use my phone very much.
Oh yeah, games will use up the battery fast.
Yeah, but have you?
Yeah, it's actually, I wouldn't like it, but it's Star Wars, so I do. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's the game like you build a base. It's like so many other games where you build a base and then you go and attack people with the guys you build, and you can upgrade your buildings and you can upgrade your units and you can spend gems to make that go faster if you don't want to wait an hour for the building to upgrade. And if you run out of gems, they'll happily sell you gems for real currency.
Right.
But it's free to play. That's what you pay when you play a free to play game.
Right.
I always prefer spending $4.99, just having an app that doesn't harass me about in-game purchases, but this one goes the other route, free to play with in-game purchases. So it's not something I would like. And then you play the actual battles, and you can choose to join the Empire or the Rebellion. And the Empire gets way better, like units and walkers and like machines and stuff. Like they're just better equipped. But the Rebellion, they have crappier units, and they don't really have all like instead of like a AT-AT walker, you get like some guy on a bantha just riding around.
Yeah.
So like but what they get are heroes. So if you play with the Rebellion, you get to recruit Chewbacca or Han Solo for a mission, and they're just really good. They're like heroes in Warcraft 3, where they just tip the scales.
Oh, nice.
Kind of balancing that the Empire has better troops, but the Rebellion has these like gritty action heroes helping them out.
Right.
And but the AI is so dumb on this, where you'll drop a bunch of people into the attack, and like there'll be some. I'm fighting a lot of Tusken Raiders right now, so there'll be sand people shooting at me, and my guys will just be like shooting at a wall, like for no reason. Like it's not even the wall's not important at all. They can walk around it. It's just like a little piece of a wall, and there's like pew 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 pew. Like you can't control them once you put them on, so you can't give them orders. You just tell them where to. You can choose where to deploy them, and then they just do their own thing. And sometimes they'll just start walking into a building, and they won't see it, and they'll just keep walking while they're getting shot at, and it's really frustrating. But Star Wars and Star Wars sound, Star Wars music, Star Wars blaster bolts. When you're not playing the game, a little R2-D2 will beep at you when something's complete, like, hey, your troops just finished training or your upgrade's done. So it's fun because of the Star Wars stuff. But it's not a good game, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I've played a lot of games like that. Yeah, like Empire at War. Do you remember that one?
Yep. Same kind of thing.
Like that one. It wasn't great. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't great. And yeah, but it was fun because it was Star Wars. And so I played it for a while. I even got the gold edition somehow.
Yeah, this is like that. It's not that fun, but it's Star Wars, so I'm still having fun.
Cool. Well, all right.
Yeah, that's our gaming experiences. It's about all I've been doing game-wise this week.
Yeah, I've been playing some. I've still been playing some Uncharted 3, so that's fun.
How does it stack up against Last of Us? Same producer.
It's fun. It's kind of the same in the sense that you kind of get beat up a lot, but because you're a pulp hero, it's like Indiana Jones. It's essentially Indiana Jones. So it's fun. It's about Drake's fortune. The Sir Francis Drake, and you're supposed to be a descendant even though he didn't have any kids, which they say in the thing. They're like, he didn't have any kids, and he's like, yeah, well, man, I still believe or whatever. So it's goofy, but it's still fun. It's funny.
That's what I usually say too.
Yeah. But yeah, it's the exact same thing as Indiana Jones. He gets beat up a lot. He somehow still comes through. There's funny moments. There's cool moments, and there's artifacts. So it's fun. I like it overall. Very good. But you and I were playing it. I think it was you and I. Was it you and I? No,
we played the demo.
Okay.
Where you're racing through the streets.
Oh, I played some at my sister's house. And like we were doing running commentary because it was later at night, and so it was really funny. Made me a lot of jokes and stuff, having a good time. But that was on a different PS3, so whenever I brought it home, I had to restart. So I haven't quite caught up to where I was. So a lot of the same, but love it. It's good game so far.
Cool.
But anyway, that wraps up our gaming experiences then, and let's move into the in-depth analysis. All right, this is the in-depth analysis section, and if you are watching live and or on YouTube, this is usually the part where we tell you don't do that. No, don't do that. But if you're not going to get any of the polish, so it doesn't have the bumper music, it doesn't have any of the polish, like none of the editing, and yeah, just overall, I guess the advantage is you get to see our stupid faces, but that's about it.
Hey, stupid faces.
Hey. But yeah. So, this episode is about, it's episode 52, Lost in Translation.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So we wanted to look at how language plays into video games. especially with localization issues, translation, and just the real language in general. So I'll start off with just a brief history of video game localization. So localization, when I say that, I mean games that come from a different country and then have to get translated into a different language and to be able to sell in a different market.
Well, and bad localization, like it's kind of charming too sometimes, though.
Yeah, it can be infamous, and lots of memes have come from that. We'll get into that soon enough. But first, the 1970s is where we first saw the video game industry take off, and 1979 is the example I'm going to go to with Pac-Man. Now, back in the 70s, localization wasn't a huge thing because there wasn't a lot of text, right? Like you just kind of figured out the game on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And but this is where a lot of games like arcade, joystick score, and game over like started introducing themselves, and a lot of terms like that introduced themselves into Japanese and French and other countries. Like if you go to like Korea and you say game over, they'll know what you mean. It's just from the 70s when these games started getting localized. But then you have Pac-Man, which in Japanese was called Puckman.
Oh yeah.
Which was based off of onomatopoeia, paku paku taberu, which is the sound in it's basically the Japanese version of nom 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 nom.
Oh, okay.
They would say paku 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 taberu, and it's supposed to be like a fish opening its mouth and closing it really fast.
Oh, okay.
So
weird.
yeah, they named it Pakuman, and when they transliterate it, so with Japanese they have the different alphabet. They have katakana and harakana, and when they go into Romanization, they have to transliterate and it kind of changes. So Pakuman became Puckman.
Oh, okay.
And so that's what it would say on the box in Japan was Puckman, and then the Japanese name underneath it, Pakuman. But when they shipped it from Japan to America and to Europe, they realized, and anyone that's seen the Scott Pilgrim versus the World movie probably knows about this, they realized that Puckman was too easy to graffiti.
Yeah.
And so they changed it to Pac-Man. And they also changed the names of the ghosts to make them more, fit.
Huh, that's interesting.
So that's
like because it was English and they're in English, there's a curse word that's really close to puck. Then we changed it.
Right.
Huh.
Right. Exactly. And then in the 80s, we started doing a lot of, these markets started opening up in Europe. And basically, the ideal video game market in the 80s are people who are looking for a new form of entertainment, who have a lot of disposable income and solid economies, which in the 80s was all over Europe, right?
Yeah.
So we developed something that in the industry they call eFigs, which is English, French, Italian, German, Spanish. These are like the go-to languages you would translate all your stuff into.
Huh.
But they would do something called box and docs, where they would just translate the manuals and the box art, and they wouldn't translate the game. So you'd play Mario Brothers, and the game manual would be in French, but the game itself would be in English still.
Okay. Oh, because reprogramming it would take a lot of time.
Right. Yeah. So this is like the best return for their money, basically.
Huh, did any of that have to do with like the space they had on the cartridges back then? Like, adding in multiple translations?
Well, what they would do is they would have what they started doing later is they'd have different versions. Like you wouldn't choose your language in the game; it would just be like this is the French version of the game, this is the English version.
Oh, okay, I remember that. Yeah.
But so that's how they did in the 80s, and then in the 90s they started actually translating the UI. So like you'd be playing Final Fantasy 6 or 3, and you would have magic, and it would be like magie or whatever language you were doing. So they actually started changing the in-game translations. And then for cinema scenes, they'd actually put subtitles in. So it'd be English cinematic scene, but with like German subtitles.
Okay.
So it's getting to be more accessible for other audiences as these games become more story-focused.
Oh, right, yeah.
But
rather than like Pong, where it's just like back and forth.
Right.
More like a text, and yeah, you start to get like things like the little like bad dudes and stuff,
Yeah. And then you come into and back then they would release things at different times. So you'd have like the Japanese release and the English release and the French release and the German release. But the problem is video games are starting to have a shorter and shorter shelf life. Like used to be you could come out with Mario 3 and it would just rock everyone's world for like a year, and now it's getting shorter and shorter how long people are talking about games. So they in the 2000s they started doing what's called the SimShip model, which is a simultaneous shipping model where they all come out at the same time. Now the problem with doing that is the translators, they don't have as much time to work on the game because they have to have the translations ready when the game releases. So they'd start working on unfinished products, like barely recognizable games, and then it just makes it harder, but it's a necessary evil.
Huh.
So as it's a relatively new industry, and we've kind of stumbled along as an industry learning how to do this. And so I found on Arcade Sushi a list of some of the 10 funniest gaming mistranslations. You alluded to these earlier. So do you ever play Fatal Fury?
Was that the side scroller?
Yeah, it was like a side-scrolling beat 'em up.
Yeah, I did.
There was this one from. There's a lot of them from this game, but the one that we chose is, "Your fist of evil are about to meet my steel wall of niceness."
I feel like the original translation probably said something different.
Probably said something awesome, yeah, but it came out Fist of Evil. It really feels like people were like, as a French teacher, sometimes people will turn in homework, and I can tell they just Google Translate or Babelfished it.
Right.
Like they were doing family trees, and I told them they could make up their family, like just use celebrities or whatever, because I don't really care who their family is. I just want the vocabulary.
Yeah.
And so one of the kids turns one in with like Taylor Swift as his cousin, and he says, "Taylor Swift is my cousin. Taylor Swift is hot," and Google Translate gave him the word "hot" that you would use to describe somebody who is aroused or in heat. Because they don't say someone's hot, attractive in French. So like idioms like that really get, like steel wall of niceness is probably a great idiom in Japanese, but Google Translate would just say steel wall of niceness.
Yeah, so that sort of answers the question of why can't you just, like have a direct translation and then be done with it?
Right. We are still years away from having just pure machine translation. Like if you want a job that's not going to be replaced by computers, translator is one of the few jobs that's going to be pretty safe for a long time because of things like that. Another game mistranslation. It's the very end of Ghosts and Goblins. It says, congratulation with an R instead of an L. We'll get into that more a little bit later, but congratulation, this story is happy end. Thank you.
Oh, I feel satisfied. That's one of those endings that really, suffices.
Yeah, and you think that one's bad. The ending of Ghostbusters says, congratulation. Congratulation, you have completed a great game and proved, with 2 O's, the justice of our culture. Now go and rest, our heroes.
The justice of our culture.
You're going to notice a lot of things. So the Japanese alphabet, the R and the L, they have one sound that's kind of in between the 2 letters. And so they have a hard time going to English because the R's and L's, they're just not sounds they're used to making.
Right.
So you're going to see a lot of R and L mess ups. Now this one is from, I know we have a lot of Metal Gear fans in the audience. This is from the original Metal Gear on the Nintendo. It's pretty famous.
I already know.
Okay, what is it?
Oh, no, I know which one you're talking about. I can't remember exactly what it was because Tim's used it a few times.
I feel asleep.
Yeah. No, wasn't there more to it? I thought it was like what was it? Or was it 2 of them I was thinking of? Oh, man, I'm going to have to... hopefully, Tim's probably listening. He's probably shouting in, but I don't remember. There was like he always says... He says, I guess it's 2 back-to-back, but I thought it was just one line.
Well, yeah, I feel asleep is the one we have here, and it's pretty famous. It's like someone... again, tenses are hard, and we'll talk about that later. Different languages treat tenses differently, so I feel asleep instead of I fell asleep, or I feel sleepy. I'm not sure what they were trying to say there, actually. Could have gone either way. Okay, this one I know you've probably heard of. This is from Legend of Zelda 2.
Yeah.
Now, remember I told you about R's and L's being tricky?
Yeah.
In Legend of Zelda 2, you go into a certain house, and there's a guy in a purple stupid tunic with a stupid beard, and if you talk to him, he says, "I am error." And a lot of people thought that was like a sentient, glitch, like error detected, I am error. But really, the guy's name was supposed to be Errol, like Errol Flynn. And just because of the way R's and L's are really hard for them to do, it came out, I am error.
Bow and error.
Yes. Speaking of R's and L's and M's, not a mix-up in Japanese, but sometimes people just typo and it doesn't get caught because these old translations were such rush jobs. So in Double Dragon 3, we find out that a year has passed since Bimmy and Jimmy defeated the Shadow Warriors.
Timmy and Jimmy.
Bimmy and Jimmy. You know Jimmy and his brother Bimmy? Yeah, there's no ambiguity there. There's no L and M mix-up. It's just a typo, and it was just a rush job. So Bimmy and Jimmy. This one's very famous for geeks in general and RPG fans specifically. This one's from Final Fantasy IV, where Tella calls somebody a spoony bard.
Oh, I've never heard of that one.
Oh yeah, spoony bard. You'll see that a lot in just geek culture. Like you'll see people with T-shirts that say spoony bard, or even recently I heard somebody like refer to somebody's bard as spoony on like a TV show.
That sounds kind of familiar.
Yeah, you spoony bard. That comes from Final Fantasy IV. This one didn't make the list, but a similar one from Final Fantasy VI/3 was Kefka calling General Leo, I think. I forget who he was calling it. Maybe it was Edgar, but it doesn't matter. He calls him a son of a submariner.
How dare you?
Which is apparently quite the insult. Next one comes from X-Men, the arcade game, where Magneto appears. And imagine you're Wolverine and Cyclops, and you just fought your way to Magneto, and he flies in a force field of magnetism over a waterfall, and you're like, oh man, what's he going to say? What's he going to say? He says, welcome to Die. I am the master of Magnet.
Oh, you got us, Magneto. I am shitting my pants.
I do not want to welcome to Die. Next one's also a really famous Nintendo era mistranslation. I've heard this a lot. A winner is you.
Oh yeah, I've heard that one. Yeah.
That's the very end of pro wrestling. When you beat the game, you have a little like wrestling guy holding his arms up triumphantly, and it says, "A winner is you."
Remember that game?
It's a hilarious disappointment for the end of the game. And finally, perhaps the most famous internet meme based on a mistranslation of all time comes from Zero Wing. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
All your base are belong to us.
Yeah.
You have no chance to resist. Make your time.
Make your time.
Somebody has set us up the bomb. Basically, that whole game is just a series of horrible mistranslations that are hilarious now.
I thought you were going to bring up, while you were bringing up the list, Final Fantasy VII. Remember when? Well, there's a few, but remember when you're right after you, in the very beginning, when you're with Barrett on the train, and he's trying to curse the guys who are in charge of, I think, Midgard or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that? And he says he goes, and he tries to insult him, and he says something stupid like I'll something that pizza face.
Oh yeah, that's right, the pizza face.
Some kind of nonsense, and it's totally lost in translation because like, wait, what the fuck did he just say? That was one of my first RPGs, after Chrono Trigger, because I had played that shortly before that. Most of my life I grew up without RPGs, so I played FF7 afterwards, and I was like, what the fuck's wrong with that guy? That doesn't make any sense. And,
Why pizza face?
someone was like, yeah, that's actually Japanese translated in English. I was like, oh.
So since then, translation's gotten a lot better, and one of the best places for translation in the industry right now is Nintendo's Treehouse. Now, not a lot of people know about the Treehouse, but it's like a top secret place inside Nintendo of America that not even other Nintendo employees can get into. You have to be a Treehouse member to get past you have to have a special card to get in. And it's pretty amazing. What they do is that they're in charge of the localization. So a game will come from Japan. To get it ready for North America, these guys will sit down and do the translation. They'll do the marketing. They'll do the videos. Like whatever it takes to make it succeed in America, these guys are in charge of. And guys and girls. Actually, the president is Leslie Swan.
I was gonna say no girls allowed in Treehouse. But...
yeah, she actually founded it. She was the editor. Remember Nintendo Power?
Yeah.
She was the editor in chief of that, and they asked her to come do a translation from Mario 64, and she said basically like, I'll do it, but I want to have actual writers on the staff, not just translators. I want writers there too, people who actually know how to write.
Nice.
Because she'd always complained about how bad the translations were. Like that was one of her big gripes. And so like, well, put your money where your mouth is. Start a translation department. So she did. Leslie Swan, you probably know her too from her famous voice acting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Peach has got it.
Oh, is that her?
Princess Peach heads up the Treehouse at Nintendo.
Wow.
So pretty big deal. This place is it's amazing. Like these guys are the best in the business when it comes to translation. It's super confidential. Like they talk everything in code. In fact, it started during Donkey Kong Country. They actually started calling it the Treehouse because that was like the code name. Like Donkey Kong Country, the graphics were so amazing they couldn't let anyone see what was going on in there.
Yeah.
So they were like, "Oh yeah, I'll see you in the Treehouse," and that became the name, and it stuck with it. But she gets up there and it's crazy. Like they'll have Nerf Wars or Smash Brothers tournaments when they're not translating, but they do a lot of translation. Like some games are translation light, like Wii Fit, right? Like that's not going to take a lot of translation. They can get that done pretty quick. But some games, like Animal Crossing, for example, 2.4 million characters in that game, which
Wow.
is roughly Japanese characters, so roughly would be like 20 novels worth of text.
Wow.
And you can't just pop into Google Translation, right? You got to look for idioms. You got to look for references to American culture that will make sense. Like for example, in Animal Crossing, there's a holiday called Golden Week, which everyone in Japan knows. It's like a really big deal. It's a week. It's Golden Week. It's like a week where the Emperor's birthday, Constitutional Memorial Day, Greenery Day, Children's Day, like they all happen in that week. And so they call it Golden Week because it's basically like a week off of school or a week off of everything for 7 days.
Cool.
But you can't say Golden Week in a game and have Americans know what they're talking about. So they have to decide what would be like something else. Like, oh, we can call it Christmas break, or we can call it spring break. You know, some kind of similar celebration.
Right.
So it's a lot of that kind of stuff going on in translation. And they always want, like one more week, but it's you gotta meet your deadlines. But they come up with some really great. Some of the best translated games come out of the Treehouse, and best localized games like. I wrote down a couple that I really liked. For example, Earthbound. That was before the Treehouse, but same philosophy. All the Mario RPGs, like Mario and Luigi RPGs, have really good translations.
Yeah. And Earthbound, yeah, was very witty. I haven't played the whole thing, but yeah, there's a lot of little things they'd say or little things they do, and yeah, it felt like they had a good grasp of the English language. It's weird that it was before that.
Yeah, but it's like the same kind of philosophy. Funnily enough, the Earthbound Mother 3, there's been a fan translation that's really, really good, and they've offered to give it to Nintendo for free, because people want that game to come out in America.
Yeah.
And somebody twittered, because the Treehouse is so like good at their job and so famous for it. Like somebody twittered offering the Treehouse your fan translation is like telling Picasso you're gonna paint a picture for him. So yeah, lots of quality that goes into that. It's a really interesting job. I've done translation myself, not for video games, but for plays. Do you know Moliere?
No, I do not.
He's kind of Francis Shakespeare. He's more of a comedian than a dramatist, but he's really like a really famous, really successful writer from around the same period, like a playwright.
Uh-huh.
And he was so good that people just got pissed at how good he was, and so this whole genre of plays came out that were just making fun of Moliere. Like it was just people on the stage talking about how much he sucked, like the characters.
Oh wow.
And it was like this anti-Moliere genre, and it now nowadays you can read any Moliere play in English easily. It's got lots of translations, but these other plays that are making fun of Moliere never made it in the translation because they sucked and were terrible and like never got any. They were just not successful. So one of my jobs when I was an undergrad. No, I was in grad school at this point. One of my jobs in grad school was to take all these plays that were making fun of Moliere and translate them into English. And it is a long and laborious process. Like, you really have to, like, okay, this is what this means. This is what it means in French. It's not my native language, so first I have to make sure it means what I think it means, and then I have to find, like, an equivalent English expression. When you're translating, it's always best to go from a language you're not native in to the language you're native in because you have more idioms to pull from
Oh, right.
in the localization. But you still have to be familiar enough with the language that you're not native fluency in to know what they're trying to say in the first place. So it's a pretty slow process. Lots of internet references and like reading articles and sometimes you will Google entire phrases to see how often that phrase is said to see if it's actually something people say.
Oh,
like
right.
does it come up in a lot of hits? So there's a lot of tricks to translation. I took an entire class in grad school about translating. So I have a lot of respect for these guys. I'm glad they get to have Smash Brothers tournaments and Nerf battles because it's a very difficult job.
Yeah, that sounds crazy. Because then you'd also have to like look for like there's a lot of little like in humor, for example. I mean, you're familiar with humor, and
Mm.
like a lot of it
I've heard of it, yes.
is how like you take something that was kind of funny just then, or something that was noteworthy, and you stuff it in your cheek like a hamster, right? And you
Yeah.
just hold on to it until you can pull it out later and bring it back around. As they say, oh, I brought it back around.
Yeah.
That's like one of the keys to humor. And so like if someone's doing that in a game or something, it's really important that you are sensitive to that and you don't use two separate phrases, right? Or like that callback, the whole geniusness of that callback will be lost. You know.
Right.
So yeah, that would be intense.
Yeah, and I found a fun little instance. There's a web page called legendsoflocalization.com that have kind of cool moments of localization if you're interested in that
Yeah.
for video games. And you mentioned Chrono Trigger being one of your first RPGs. Do you remember the scene where you can travel back in time with Luca to save her mom from getting sucked into the conveyor belt and losing her legs?
Yeah, vaguely.
Now in the game, her mother's name, she's getting pulled into it, and this is like Luca changing the past so her mother isn't crippled anymore. And you find a note that says that the password is Luca's mom's name, and her mother's name is Lara, Lara. So in the English version, you take the Super Nintendo controller and you press the L button, the A button, the R button, the A button, and that turns off the machine.
Okay.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, yeah.
Now, unfortunately, in Japan, we have problems, like I said, telling L from R because they don't have that sound. So they have in Japanese, the mother's name is Rara, which could be Lara, could be Lala, could be Rala, or could be Rara, depending on how you on how you hear it.
Yeah.
So, but they still have the controllers, so they still have the same puzzle, but it's kind of trial and error. And if you get it wrong, like she's gonna die.
Oh,
So, so basically, in Japanese they translate as Lala, Lala.
yeah.
So in the Japanese version of the game, you have to press LA to save her. So what ends up happening is about 4 times as many mother fatalities in Japan than in America because of that ambiguity in the language. So these translation issues can actually change the way the game is played sometimes.
Right. Yeah. That tragic backstory, though.
That tragic backstory. If only we had the L and a distinct L and R sound in our alphabet.
It saves lives.
Could save my mom.
Wow. Yeah, it's
So-
funny how big like some of these translation things were in language where I didn't even think about it until we started doing this episode, and I was like, well, actually, yeah, this is kind of a big deal. Like, you can't just Google translate things, and even if you can't, it's not like just I don't know having the localization, I guess, process. If you don't have it, it's kind of with the polish on games now, it's kind of it can really wreak havoc on your reviews if
Yeah.
you're saying things strangely or you're missing things.
Yeah, and with good localization, it really stands out. Like Bravely Default, you're like, that is a clever translate. Like, I guess what I should say is good translation doesn't stand out. Like, it's hard to think of instances of good translation
Right.
than that, because good translation is by design supposed to not distract from the game.
Right, it's seamless.
But yeah, it's really interesting. I applied for that job with Blizzard, localizing for French,
Yeah.
and so it's a career that I've always kind of looked at and been like, man, what would that be like to have that as your weekly routine?
Blizzard was number 3, and whenever developers came out with, they did this mass survey of like people who develop games, and they said, "What companies would you like to work for?" And it went like this: first, Valve, even if they didn't work at Valve, and even if they worked something else. Second one, wherever they worked currently. They say, "Oh, I like where I work currently," right? The
Mhm.
third one was Activision Blizzard, which is Blizzard proper. So it's a pretty rad company. So I think I'd like to work there. Valve, because you get so much creative license. They don't have bosses or managers there. They just all work in a bullpen together. So that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I hate bosses always sitting in their rooms by themselves, and you have to fight through the whole level to get to them, and then
Ugh, yeah, no, mini bosses. Come on, just
Yeah.
get segregation.
mini bosses, assistant to the manager.
Yeah.
Dwight's a mini boss. So yeah, but thinking about like language as we were doing this week, like made me think about language as a whole and how it actually changes the way we think. And I came across a paper by Keith Chen, who is an economist, PhD out of UCLA,
Mhm.
and he was talking about how different languages have different tenses, and that kind of shapes how we think. So, for example, he's Chinese or from his family,
Yeah.
and we have the word uncle, right? And that's just your uncle. But in Chinese, you would have a word specifically for which uncle he is, whether it's on your mother's or your father's side, whether it's like an uncle by marriage or an uncle by birth, if he's older or younger than your father, if he's your uncle's brother.
Huh.
They have a specific word for each one of these, so you can't ignore it. It's obligatory information. If you want to speak correctly, you have to constantly think about these relationships. And so this fascinated him because, I'll say uncle to you, and you'll just think of a generic uncle figure, but if I say uncle to a Chinese speaker using a specific Chinese word, they're constantly aware, like because of this like whole family thing, like they're constantly thinking about relationships more than we are.
Yeah.
And so then he's thinking about the future tense.
Okay.
It will rain tomorrow. It's raining now. And some languages don't have a strong future tense. Like in English we do, and in French we do, right? We'll say like I'm going to the store.
Yeah.
Or I will go to the store tomorrow would be a strong future tense. Or I'm going to go to the store would be a weaker future tense, but still future tense. But in Finnish they don't do that. They just say I go to the store. I go to the store tomorrow. I go to the store in 2 days. It's like they don't have a future tense.
Huh.
And what a future tense forces you to do, or was its theory, was it kind of grammatically forces you to cleave the present and the future into two different parts, like viscerally different parts. So like you ever been up at 1 in the morning and you know you have to wake up at 6 a.m., but fuck that. That's future David's problem. That's not my problem.
Yeah.
Our ability to separate ourselves from our future selves comes from being able to think about the future in this way, or at least that's his theory. And so, professors come up with theories all the time. How would you prove that?
Right.
And so, he looks at spending habits. He looks at economies. He looks at health habits. He says people who are thinking about the future are more likely to save for retirement, for example, more likely to exercise, more likely to, not smoke or to quit smoking.
Right.
And so what he did was he took languages like Finnish and languages like English, and he would compare, and sure enough, he found that people in these countries that don't have a strong future tense are more likely to save money. It was like statistically significantly more likely. Like I think it was like 30% more likely.
Wow.
Oh yeah, here we go. They're 20 to 24% less likely to be smoking at any given point in time, and they're 13 to 17% less likely to be obese when they retire, and they're 21% more likely to have used a condom in their most recent sexual encounter. Tons of things like that. Saving money for retirement, exercise. All these things he found were people without a future tense were better at thinking about their future selves, because to them, their future self was the same as their present self.
Huh.
Like if you talk to a guy who's working at maybe Kinko's, and you're like, hey man, you like working at Kinko's? He's like, no, not really, but I'm going to be a screenwriter someday. Oh, cool. Yeah, give me, like in 20 years, you look me up. I'm going to be a famous director. Like in 20 years, he's still going to be working at Kinko's because he's thinking of that future self differently than what he is right now, and he's not like actively changing things right now to get to that future self.
Right.
And so, people were skeptical of that, obviously, because it's very deterministic. It's very much like, oh man, you have no free will. Like your language kind of controls how you think. We don't like that. So there's been studies like this since the 30s, and they've been like looking through it. This is the latest one. They've tried to control for it. Like they would go through and redo the study, but only in Finland. So like take the cultural element out of it and the economic level out of it, and say just Finnish people who have native English speaking and native Finnish speaking, because a lot of people in Finland actually grow up speaking English now because Finnish is such a dying language. Yeah, and sure enough, like the results held true. It still came out like what they would control for economics, they control for social things like how many parents, like everything they could think of to control for. They still found that language was the thing that determined whether or not somebody would think for the future or not.
Huh.
And it's all about being able to actually think of the future like that. Same thing with the subjunctive. Like some languages don't have a subjunctive mood. Like there's 3 moods in English. There's the imperative, which is a command. Like, do this. There's the indicative, which is just a statement of fact, like, this is the way it is. I am on a podcast. And the subjunctive is for things that could be but aren't, like counterfactuals, or like, I should have done this. If I had done this, then this would have happened. If Hitler had not been stopped, Nazis would take over the world, kind of things.
You should be listening to this podcast.
Yeah, you should be listening to this podcast, or you should have listened to this podcast. Like, you should is still kind of indicative, right? Like, this is a fact. You should be listening, but you should have. Now we're kind of in this, like, what would have happened if you hadn't?
Oh, right.
And it's this what would have happened if I'd made different decisions in the subjunctive that makes English speakers think differently than, say, Vietnamese speakers who don't have a subjunctive tense. Like, if you walk up and be like, what would have happened to a Vietnamese refugee? Phuc Tran, or Phuc Train as we call him.
Fuck train, yeah.
He presented on this because his parents are Vietnamese, and they escaped, the refugee stuff during the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And some of them, some of their family did, and they stayed behind and were tortured and killed. And so he could talk like to his father. They didn't get on the fuck train.
That's good thing. It's PHUCTRAN.
Right, which is pronounced Phuc, but you see that written and you're like, oh, the fuck train.
Right. All aboard.
Anyway, like, the ability to think about that, because he's an English speaker, but his father speaks Vietnamese as his main language, so he'd be like, man, what would have happened if we'd stayed behind, or what would have happened if we'd done this or done that? And his father is just like, why are we talking about this? What's the point of that? It doesn't matter what would have happened. That's not the way reality is. So people without a subjunctive tense are more focused on, like, this is how it is, these are the facts, whereas people with a subjunctive tense tend to think more in counterfactuals, tend to think more about, like, oh, if only we'd done this, if only we'd done this, if only you knew the power of the dark side. Subjunctive, right?
Right.
Versus Yoda, like, do or do not, there is no try. That's an indicative statement. So it really kind of controls, like, your optimism. In fact, they studied and they found that the most optimistic countries didn't have subjunctive tenses. Like, Vietnamese is one of the most, if you look at, it was like the OECD who did this study, and they found that, like, Vietnamese people were very optimistic, whereas the least optimistic people were the French, who have 2 subjunctive tenses and existentialism. So they're really depressed.
Studying that language is a nightmare when you get to subjunctive.
Oh, subjunctive is really hard to teach. But yeah, so it's really interesting. We get locked into these thought patterns by our language, and it's bidirectional, right? Because, like, language informs culture, but culture also created language, so it kind of goes both ways.
Right.
Like, not having a future tense could be the result of an agricultural system based on rice, which you have to harvest all the time, like, just all year round. You're just bringing in the rice. Versus, French and English, who have a lot of future tense. We were subsisting off of wheat, which is kind of we can put that off till tomorrow, and then there's a big harvest kind of thing. So you need a future tense for that, because that's when the big harvest will be. So anyway, it's really interesting bidirectionality thing that's people just don't realize how much language actually shapes thoughts and behavior.
Oh yeah, 'cause language is weird. It's crazy intense. It's complex.
It is complex, and none know it more than a psychologist.
Indeed. Yes. It is. I mean, I didn't actually, ACT therapy, which is the one that I talk about a lot on this podcast, acceptance commitment therapy. One of the things it focuses on is literally language, and it focuses on that because there's been some cool research done by something called relational frame theory. Mm-hmm. Basically, that's like kind of what you're talking about. You were saying, people's culture, is formed by language and also informs language, which is true. You've heard about the whole, the Alaskan people have, or not Alaskan, Native Alaskans actually have,
all the words for snow.
Yeah, all the different words for snow. And I used to say, well, that's stupid because I had this argument in cognitive, and I said, well, that's stupid because, we have the same ways to express that language. It's simply by saying wet snow or heavy snow. We say the same things. But then I thought, no, but the problem is the ambiguity. Like, sometimes we will just say, it's going to snow, it'll be snowing that week or whatever. And then by saying that, they'll say, oh, okay. And they'll take by context it means that, it must be heavily snowing because he said we won't be able to do it. But that's an assumption, and it may not be true. That person actually may be, trying to ditch out, and that's something that you would definitely miss out on in English, whereas as a Native Alaskan, an Eskimo, you would not. You'd say, wait a minute, but you said it was only going to be light snowing, so you'll go. So yeah. Yeah,
it might even actually change the way they see snow. Like, they might be better at noticing different types of snow because they're thinking in that way. Like, I know they've done studies with certain Indian dialects that don't have a different word for yellow and orange, and they've actually have a harder time telling the difference. Like, when you show them different colors, different hues, they can't distinguish them.
Yeah,
because
I
they're
mean,
not used to looking for those differences. Or like Aboriginal people, there's an Aboriginal tribe that doesn't have a word for left or right, and so what ends up happening is they have really good direction sense. They know north, south, east, and west really well. Even inside a building, they know which way is north because they've had to like learn how to think without using left and right as a frame of reference.
right, yeah. When you can't talk about something, the funny thing is, it's not language is not just how we talk; it's also how we think and how we store information. So,
Hmm.
like, in fact, when people say "I'm thinking" to a psychologist, that means you're sub-vocalizing, is what we say.
Hmm.
Because you don't think people don't think in pictures. They daydream in pictures sometimes, but they'll think, or we
Yeah.
call ruminating, by sub-vocalizing. So they'll say things like, like tired right now. I'm tired right now, for example.
Yeah.
Or they'll think something like, "Whoa, that was close," in their head.
Yeah,
They're
or
having
more commonly like, oh, I need to do the laundry, or I should start the dishes.
yeah. Or in my head, "Fucking laundry," or fuck.
I
But yeah, exactly. You're using words, right?
should have drank so much last night. Stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. And what's funny is there's a disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, which operates on that principle. It's not based on imagery. Like imagery would be things like phobias. Like if I say I can invoke a phobia, a visceral response to someone who's phobic by saying something like oh dude, there's a spider on your shoulder right now, and if someone's arachnophobic, they would like, "Ugh," and they would freak out. And all I did was use language. And the funny thing is about that is people are like, well, so what? So what? You use a word to evoke a visceral response. To me, that's incredibly interesting as a psychology guy, right? And to psychologists all over the place, because here's the thing. Here's how relational frame theory works, and I hope this is interesting to everyone else. And if it's not, then tell me I'm dumb, and we'll move on. But okay, so there's arbitrary relationships between language, like concepts that we express through language, and then there's natural ones, right? So like okay, so if I start telling you about this, um, I saw this guy that was laying on the street and he got ran over by a bus. His head was actually like eviscerated from his body, and he had like pieces of his skull were like fragmented off, and it was disgusting. His eyeball popped out and was walling around. It was in the hot sun, so it had this real distinct smell. Just by talking about that, some people can kind of get a disgust face. They're like,
Mhm.
oh god, or just me myself, like I got a little nauseated just talking about it, because it's not something you want to think about. It's very uncomfortable, which is weird because I'm using language, and I just caused you to do that. Now, if I said that whole thing in French, only you would be bothered by it, David, or to our Canadian listeners, some of the Quebecois or the French speaking, the
Mhm.
francophones might also know. But you see how like if I knew Chinese, then I could say that to you, and you wouldn't have any visceral reaction. It's this learned kind of
Yeah.
relationship between it. But the cool thing is there is a natural one that we learn easily, and animals can do, and there's an arbitrary one which only or not English language speaking or language apes can do, like us. We're
Uh-huh.
the only ones. And for a long time, people have been like, why do we get anxiety disorders, and why do we get like these different things that animals don't? And why can we express language and thoughts and hold these concepts in our heads and stuff? Like, how come? Why are we the ones with language? Evolutionary folks say that. Why do we end up with language, and these other animals end up with like very simple ways to communicate experiences? The funny thing is, because they don't know what is. Well, what does that mean? Okay, that's where relational frame theory comes in, and this is, I think, pretty interesting. Like I said, stop me if it's not. I'd be like,
So wait, just to clarify, you're talking about like arbitrary reactions. That'd be like if I say, shit to some English speaker, he's gonna get offended. But if I say merde, he's gonna like, oh, whatever, which is just a French version of shit. So it's like he had to learn culturally to be offended by that word. There's nothing intrinsically offensive by the sound of it.
Well, yeah, okay, so it'd be like this. If you witnessed that person, that I was just explaining before. I won't go over it again because it's disgusting. But
Hmm.
if you witnessed that scenario, there is a non-arbitrary, the very natural reaction to that, which is disgust, right?
Right.
Disgust, and then what we call avoidance or escape. You'd be like, ugh, you back up a little bit. You might even walk away or close your eyes. You
Hmm.
get that away, and that's totally natural. Like even if someone was raised in the woods and never learned how to talk, they can
Right.
do that, right? Then there's arbitrary ones, which are learned ones, but they aren't natural. So, for example, so like if I show you a picture of someone, that's doing that is rotting,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
you would have that natural reaction. But if I said, by me saying rotting person, there's not a natural reaction. If I said it to a baby or someone who's just learning English, nothing. So that was a learned thing. The funny thing is, what we do to teach people that, like if I'm teaching my kids a certain language, is we say, I show them a picture of something, I say cup, and I say the word, right? Then they associate those two things. And
That's how they taught the baby X
Huh?
word. That's how they taught that baby computer words.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah. And so with animals, for example, okay, so first I'll say what humans can do. This is a cool thing. So like I show you a picture of a dog and I say dog, and then we're able to say, okay, he said that verbal thing that just happened, that auditory buzz in my ear, now I know it kind of matches up to this thing he just showed me. And the natural reaction to a dog, maybe, whatever. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how evolutionary we're kind of pushed towards that. Probably like cuteness if it's my dog, he's pretty cute. And except right now he's chewing on something. Don't chew on that, Doge. What are you doing? Anyway, then there's so dog is cute. Well, okay, well hold on. So so you've got this picture of a dog, the verbal utterance dog, and then also the word dog, D-O-G. If I hold that up and I say dog, then what you have to do is you look at the letters. If you've never seen it before, like if it was like Grant or something, you would spell it out in your head. Grant. Okay, Grant. And then I say Grant, and then I show the picture. Well, I never taught you the word Grant, like written down on a piece of paper, and the sound Grant, but now you've just drawn a frame between those two, right? So now, because I never taught that Grant, like the utterance, like whenever I say Grant, and when I show the word on a piece of paper, Gront, I've never taught that relationship, but now you can easily, A equals B, and then A equals C, so okay, C equals B kind of thing, right? But that's actually a fallacy too, but that's why we're so prone to them. But because we've been taught over and over and over that's actually a good way to learn. So anyway, yeah, so sorry, my dog is chewing these things.
So frame theory is being able to make those connections?
Yeah, and there's a funny thing about it is that actually informs us clinically because so people learn those pretty well. Humans, not dogs or animals. We can't seem to show that little extra logical leap there between those two, right? Is you show a certain symbol, that symbol, which is the spelling for us. We symbolize things through spelling, right? In whatever language we have, and like I could show you the Chinese characters for dog or something, then show you the picture, and then over time you could say, got it, right? And then I'd say, oh yeah, and when I show them a dog, and then I say whatever the Chinese word for it, like Feng Chao or something, I could say that, and then you would put that together, and then humans can obviously make that second leap of, okay, Feng Chao, that was those characters, got it. So whenever I hear Feng Chao, I think of those characters, right? Mm-hmm. Animals can't do that, which, okay, so what? So what? I mean, we have that little extra loop thing, that's pretty cool, but what? So what? I can attach a symbol to an auditory sound. Well, it shows a generalization. It's what we call a generalization of stimuli, because I just showed you 3 separate stimuli, and you generalized a relationship between those, right? Okay, so what? You're talking really nerdy about language. How does that possibly inform me as the average listener of the Game Theory podcast? I don't care, except that it's mildly interesting. Well, that generalization is what causes things like phobias. So, for example, I show you a picture of a spider, right? Or you see a spider, and then you realize that, like a really realistic drawing of a spider, and also the verbal utterance, spider, right? Or like the feeling of a certain, that tingly feeling. You look down, you notice, oh, that's how a spider feels on my arm. All those things inform each other, right? Mm-hmm. So pretty soon I could say something like spider on your neck, and it can actually cause like physical hallucinations, right? So like you can actually go, ugh, and you reach back there and you're like, oh man, when you said that, I thought I felt it. Weird, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a human thing. Like we not only tie all those things together, they all inform each other and they all kind of fire off. So it's like I get that feeling, I get that scared feeling that I get around an actual spider, right? There's no actual spider here, but you imagined it, and so all those things popped up, right? Pretty strange. So in clinical, psychology, if we're informed by the RFT, which is relational frame theory, we're going to break those. We're going to expose you to each of those, ones individually, and then kind of test them and then unbreak them from those frames. But the point is that's why language is so powerful. Is because we start generalizing these these frames and then across each other and with each other, and so the spreading or infection of like an idea or a word with all the different stimuli associated with it, right? And because of that, people learn to avoid more and more and more and more to the point where they won't go to a zoo, because when they think of zoo, that kind of makes them, oh, this that this correspondence or this idea of spiders might be there if there's a spider exhibit, right? And they had learned to tie those two together, that kind of thing. So the fact that, and the reason why I'm getting so nerdy about it is because I'm showing how powerful language is and what goes on with language and how we can tie those things together to other real life stimuli, right? Or our visceral reactions, right? Our feelings, our thoughts, our cognitions, they all go together. And so pretty soon, because of those generalizations, we're going to start avoiding people even saying spider. There's people who are like for example, with people who have been raped, right? They don't even like hearing the word rape. Pretty soon they don't like it written down. You've seen people on the internet.
It's a trigger word.
Yeah, they say quote-unquote trigger warning. And to me, as a psychology guy, I'm like, nope, don't stay away from triggers. Well, do. But eventually in therapy, we're going to teach you how to not give a shit about that word, heard, and then also seen. We're going to break those down a little bit. But
and even outside of phobias, like language is really powerful in psychology. Like in treatments, like you're always saying don't shit on yourself, which is basically saying stay out of the subjunctive.
Yeah, the subjunctive is the first thing I thought of whenever you're talking about that, because you said should, and it instantly pulls in this hypothetical, right? A hypothetical of, oh, I should have been this, or I should be doing this, and then it's like,
it's like in the past, but you didn't do it. But what would the world be like if you had done it?
Yeah, and one of the coolest interventions. Okay, there's two things I'm really excited to talk about with language. And one of the two coolest interventions is one is I say let's stop saying but so much, like especially in like relationship therapy, like in family therapy or couple.
What if you like big butts and you don't want to lie about it?
Well, then you're allowed to say but as much as you want. But typically I say don't say but because you've heard this before. It negates everything you just said, right?
Right.
So
I'm not racist, but.
Right. Or well, I really like going to the park, but or I really like you, but when you do this, it makes me mad. And I say,
right.
Let's, instead of saying but, say and. We're really big in the Western culture with this or that, but more Eastern cultures are more about inclusiveness. So like this and also this, because it is kind of true. I both like video games and don't like video games.
Right.
Because
it's also the phrase "no offense" is always going to make somebody offended.
Yeah.
Like on
correct.
Like on that show I was watching with the horse, he's driving with Alison Brie's character, and she's like, "Oh man, at least I'm not gonna die alone," because she just got engaged. She's like, I'm just so relieved I'm not gonna die alone." And then she goes, "No offense." And he's like, "None taken." Until you said "no offense," like it's automatically counterproductive. Yeah. It's like the word "but." It just negates everything before it.
Well, because you're like, why would I be offended? Oh yeah, that is kind of.
Oh yeah, that applies to me. Aww.
Exactly. Yeah. But
no buts.
Exactly, but yeah, I tell them say and. So like I really love you, and I also get a little frustrated when you do this. See, that totally is a totally different meaning, even though when I had it in my head, I was trying to convey it to you a certain way, but it still has bidirectional. As soon as I utter it, I kind of like file it away that way of like I really love you, but that people have a different Actually, I've never seen a study like this, but I've seen studies similar to this where it's shown that, like, when someone speaks a certain statement and they use certain like deterministic language, it's more likely to affect their valence, which is like your happiness or your emotional kind of like level. And and when you say and, it softens that, because then we're allowing for exceptions, right? We say things like, I love you, and I get frustrated when you do this, right?
Oh, yeah. Valence, like it's like the studies that show that when you stomp your toe and you say like, oh fuck, like it actually does make you feel a little better than if you said like, oh snap or whatever. Yeah. So like language can actually affect your your mood, your biochemistry. Like it's got an effect on you.
Is that crazy? Your feelings and your subjective feelings and stuff are based on a chemical system, of course. And so I'm just teaching you how to interact with that without using another chemical system, which is pills, right?
How to hack the system.
How to hack the system with just simple environmental variables with no side effects. That's psychology. So language. Yeah, so another thing of language is this. This is really cool. This is operating on that relational frame theory too. So like if I say the word Final Fantasy VI, or for me, Final Fantasy Tactics, right? Something like that. Or I say something like, oh, tabletop RPG. You want to play a tabletop RPG this weekend? How do you feel about that? Just kind of notice in general.
General positive.
Right.
Happiness.
Right. Sure. Yeah. And so but then that's because we have this this understanding of this relationship between the words based on our experiences. But over time, if you break those down, you can imagine in the clinical setting, we have negative experiences with that. But the funny thing is, someone will say something like, I'm a good gamer. It makes them feel good. They say, like, I'm a bad gamer. doesn't make them feel very good. Like if I just got shit on in a game a bunch and I'm like, I'm bad at this game, it makes you feel a certain way because you just uttered it, right?
Hmm.
And if you think it, it's actually a little less powerful. And when you say it, it actually increases the feelings a little more. So sometimes we'll say things like positive self-talk, which is like a really, I don't want to say cheesy. I don't always like using it because it feels a little woo-woo, but it's actually shown scientifically because of the fact that when we say things out loud, it has a stronger affective effective on our affect. So it like makes our feel a little better or a little stronger in whatever direction
Right.
than we just think it. So it's important to say it out loud when it's a positive thought because someone who's like maybe suffering from depression, this can be like a little trick to like kind of help a little bit. It doesn't
Yeah.
cure, but it's a nice little thing that I do encourage. I say like, make sure we're saying these nice things too, because it also, like with your spouse, for example, too. Reward them verbally, and don't just think it, but when you reward them verbally, it's super fecund because not only do you make them feel better, you also feel better than you would have if you just thought it.
What if she's a telepath? She still say it out loud though because it helps you to say it out loud.
I don't know. There's no studies on that. But I imagine if I was married to Jean Grey, yeah, probably. I would probably say it out loud. But where was I going from there? Oh yeah, so yeah, the whole thing of like language in general, it is super important. The reason why I'm underlying or why I'm going over these underlying kind of psychological principles and how we are affected by language is because that was one of the first things I thought about when I was like, well, who cares if the language is a little off in a video game? Wait, it could mean quite a bit actually, because if someone who's sculpting language very well to make you feel a certain thing, like in like Last of Us where you have all the feels, and they screw up a couple of those words, and they don't understand like how the average person, the average gamer would process that word just by their own experience, then then it could totally ruin the feeling, which could be the climax of the game.
And that's why it's so important to have a good localization team that has both translators and writers. So what they'll do when they're translating it is they'll first do a literal translation, and then they'll put notes, like little parentheses in the side that say like, or at least that's how they do it at the Treehouse. I imagine lots of people do it this way, but they'll put little notes, like little translation, and then the side be like, this is an idiomatic expression that generally means this, or he's speaking with this kind of accent. So they'll do a word-for-word translation, send it to actual writers who don't see the source material, and then they have to put it into French or Japanese or whatever, but make it sound like something a Japanese person would have said and not something a Japanese person translating English would have said. So really it's a two-step process. You gotta like get the general gist of it, and then you gotta make it the perfect sense, perfect words to get those feels, those Last of Us feels translated to German or whatever.
Yeah, a lot of it is like wordplay, and then also metaphor. Metaphor being like like you're a festering whatever in like a festering cancerous wart on the countryside of America, right? That means something totally different to an English speaker than if someone said like you're a strange annoyance in the underarm of this country. Or something, right?
I have a steel wall of niceness.
Right. Yeah, and it totally means that. And one of the examples that I found, that I was trying to find some good examples of like in general where people worded things very well and it really conveyed a meaning well. That's what like poets do this well. For example, they're very in tune with like how to mess with some words in a certain way to make you have a certain feeling.
Yeah, like knowing which connotations are attached to each word and
right. And they're
what
just
imagery it's going to evoke.
And the funny thing is they're absolute amateurs as far as like psychology goes. They don't know why, but they just have experience with it. So they go, oh, I'm going to do it this way, right? So yeah, they have no scientific understanding of like what a certain word does, but they're like, oh, when I used these in the past, it worked well. Maybe if I try something slightly off of that, oh, that worked too. This one didn't.
Right.
And, but I always have I always had a respect for wordsmiths because I don't have that ability at all. I just stumble through my words and speak too quickly and say a lot and that kind of thing. But people who can put those words together well in their heads or on paper, just really cool. And one example of that was you mentioned Metal Gear Solid earlier, and that we have some fans in the audience, so I'm sure they'll like this part too. But at the end of Metal Gear Solid 2, it's kind of talking about the Patriots, the AI folks, and it's talking about how oh man, this part will it'll have a reaction probably with you, but you can YouTube it or there's probably scripts out there and stuff. But basically, it's like they're talking about how the evolution of ideas or the evolution of people, like it's a really cool concept because psychologically, because people avoid being corrected, for example, right? So because of that, we feel uncomfortable when we have a conversation where we said some things we felt kind of smart and we felt like we helped the group, and the group is like, all right, yeah, thanks for the information, and someone goes, actually, Snopes that, and you're a freaking idiot, right?
Right.
You'd feel a little bad probably.
Sure, that's a natural reaction.
Yeah, and so most people would avoid, hearing that. Some people like look at people who do essential oils, for example.
Mm.
When I was at this health fair, I walked up and essential oils, anyone in the scientific community knows that doesn't work. But or it's placebo is what it is, or
No,
pleasant.
no, they cured Ebola. Didn't you see their press release?
No, that's horrible. I'm actually a little upset that they even said that. But there was a table at the health fair of essential oils, and I walked up and I almost started a conversation. There's also a play therapy, quote unquote, which is not based. It doesn't work. And I started a conversation, but it turns out the people were so nice at the play therapy thing. They actually gave me candy, and I just felt horrible, so I just left. But that's the thing is I didn't want them to feel bad, so I didn't correct them. That they talk about that in that Metal Gear Solid 2, kind of like the AI talk, is they said that's a cancer to the human race that's prohibiting you from evolving. There are people who there are ideas that need to get cut out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or pieces of your culture that need to get cut out. The fact that we spend so much time on Twitter and like Facebook, it's this vapid, immediately reinforcing activity that's actually not good for our evolution as a species.
Yeah. Side note: join our Facebook group and Twitter.
Yeah, join those. Yeah, because yeah. You should. No, well, I think we don't do a lot of that. We don't do a lot of just multi-posts. That's why we're not so successful on Twitter, is because we don't get on there and just say like it's raining. Ugh, who hates that? And stuff like that. Those are highly correlated.
Pick up a book, learn about the Holocaust.
The Holocaust, yeah. So yeah, that was one of the infamous tweets of stupidity. But yeah, let me see. Yeah, so with that happens. Yeah, so this AI was kind of talking about that and how those need to be trimmed out. Take those pieces of culture out. Take those pieces of humanity out. And if there's people who sequester themselves into these rich gated communities, and they only surround themselves by yes men, they're actually bad for the human race. It's not just, but it's super comfortable. Very cool because in psychology we talk about that all the time. Part of life is suffering. This is ACT especially. They say you're supposed to suffer. It's like my kids. Like Elijah, he fell down off a bike and then he never wanted to get on another one. And Davian, my other son, he gets on a bike, he falls down. Okay, that's part of learning how to ride a bike, and he keeps going, right? It's that language that he used of that's just part of learning how to ride a bike versus I got hurt, I don't want to get hurt again, and so I'm not going to do it. Once you accept that pain is part of you being the person you want to be, naturally, then if you can't, you're psychologically more healthy and you're less avoidant of behaviors. So anyway, diatribe there. I'm using language and I'm getting off track. But basically, that Metal Gear Solid 2 ending, I feel like was a really good example of someone, using language to evoke a certain feeling. Because first you get like, no, AI is bad, but they say they do it for your own good, and you're like, oh, maybe the AI is good. So yeah, it's this kind of mixed emotion, kind of this tumultuous cognitive dissonance that's going on. Very cool example of people using language in video games. Kind of one of the first ones that really, stood out to me.
Yeah, for sure. And not just video games, movies, films, books have been doing this for centuries, but it's something that we have to be cognizant of. Even this is a little off topic too, but even accents carry their own connotations, right? Like if I come and present a paper to you and I'm like, okay, and in my studies I found that this and this and this happens and X equals Y, and you're like, oh, so there's credibility to that accent, to that Cambridge accent, But if I walked up and I was like, and then when I did the research, I found that this is going to be this way. It's the same country, different accent, it's Cockney now, and suddenly you don't care about what I have to say. Or sadly for your Mississippi colleagues, the Southern accent often loses you credibility in academia.
Yep.
If I walk up, I'm like, all right, y'all, I got a paper here, gonna deliver, like good grammar, but with a Southern accent, people will be less likely to take me seriously.
Yeah, it's the connotations are approachability, comfort, and that the person's not going to be an intellectual and won't make you feel stupid,
Right, but if you want to be a politician, Southern accent's very useful because people don't want intellectuals for politicians. They want someone they can have a beer with. That's why George W. Bush was 8 years as president. He was able to convey that, I'm just one of the boys. If you saw me in a bar, we'd have a drink together, kind of feeling.
Yeah, I talked about that with Amy. We were talking about living here in the South and what that's like. Kind of just talking about in general. And one of the things I said was, I try to think of the positive and the negative of every situation. And I thought, positively, I actually admire how they're so verbally comforting. Oh, honey, and like, oh, bless her heart, stuff like that. Yeah. And they actually mean the same things as other people mean. But I think overall they are probably more comforting. It's bidirectional, because of how they talk. But I'm not fooled by. I heard someone once say, a Southern girl said, "Well, when we say bless your heart, it actually means you're kind of dumb." And I was like, "Okay, all right."
Right, right.
No,
Bless your heart, you're too stupid to know better is kind of the
right.
underlying connotation there.
And I used to think it was
Bless
like a praiseworthy thing, like, oh, bless his heart, like oh, good for you, or oh,
Yeah,
she's
it's like a mental like pat on the head.
right, yeah, and so verbally they're very comforting. Whereas, but actually, personally, they have a pretty large distance, pretty big bubble, which like standoff distance probably as Texans would call it, pistol standoff. But yeah, I don't know. So that's a funny little difference between language and behavior there as well.
No, it's really I challenge anyone that wants to do this, like go someplace where nobody knows you. Like I did this in college once. I went to a church that nobody knew me, and just have a different accent and see how people treat you differently. Like people will react differently to you. Like I went to this ward and, oh yeah, my name's David. I grew up in Ireland, but I'm here for study abroad. And just do a little bit of an Irish accent for the whole day, and just keep it going for like a week, 2 weeks. Like just see how people more people want to take you out to dinner. People will just think you're charming because they associate charm with an Irish accent. You could be the same amount of wit, same amount of charm, same amount of looks, but you're charming now.
Yeah.
You talk like this now. You're having a bit of an accent that's different. Or if you're good at Australian or German or French, pick an accent and see how it changes people's reactions to you. Like these are social experiments that you can run, and people treat you differently based on not only the language you speak, but even the very accent has a connotation to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'd be cool. I think that's always a fun experiment to like try on a different person for the day, and harmless. No one gets hurt. As long as you're not doing it to like actually I don't know, take advantage of someone. But other than that, it's good.
Yeah.
But if I could stay in an accent long enough without screwing something up, I would do it. I think one of my best ones is my Scottish one, and I always fall out and do Irish a lot. So.
Yeah, but most ears won't be able to pick up the difference on it too much unless it's obvious.
That's true.
Well, so yeah, language, big topic, one that we both have a lot of background in. Me as a linguistics person, and you as a psychology person. So
I need to get my PhD, and then I don't have to say that anymore.
I know. I was like, you're not a psychologist, but you're like a person in the psychology area.
I know. The wording, the language we have to use, literally.
Again, yeah, the language. Like calling yourself doctor right now would actually be a harmful act using that word.
Well, yeah, and at the health fair, people would ask me, they're like, "Oh, so are you a psychologist?" I was like, "No, I'm just a graduate level clinician." And they were like, "What is the difference?" And I was like, "It's legal. 2 years and an internship, basically, or not even 2 years. I've got all the coursework, so some more hours that's supervised and an internship. That's it."
Right.
And so guided practice, but yeah. Well, just legally, I can't call myself that.
Right.
But you guys have all the knowledge, of course. Anyway, yeah. So language, pretty crazy. I have a ton more to say about it. So, but we don't have the time. It's not perfectly appropriate. It's just very interesting.
Right.
So maybe we'll find a use for it later on some other episode.
For sure.
Until then, let's move into the feedback section. All right, this is the feedback section, and here's where we talk about the interactions we had with the community. So we've been kind of a dry spell for emails for a bit. Did we get any?
No, none new. So, yeah, the Game Theory Podcast at gmail.com. Let's hear your voices, people. What do you have to say? Use your language.
Use your language. I think one of the biggest thing that stopped the emails is because we've had so much more activity on our Facebook page. So
yes. We actually... checking in on that, last week we talked about gamer types, and I asked the Facebook page what they classified themselves as, and the results were surprising to me. I don't know if they were to you.
Really? Oh, yeah, actually.
Yeah, so these are people who are on social network, and they have taken the extra step to join our Facebook group, which you can join at facebook.com/groups/Game Theory Podcast. And so I was expecting kind of a mix, but what we ended up getting were a vast majority of our listeners self-identify as soloists.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty weird.
We had 3 strategists, and everyone else was a soloist except for,
me.
You were a competitor, and John Little, who's in our Edge of the Empire group, and myself are socialites. But yeah, lots of solo players in the Game Theory podcast. So we're a community of loners, as it seems.
Yeah, definitely.
Or at least gaming behavior wise. Like they may not be loners in life, but they like to sit down by themselves and just really get into a game.
Yeah, which is really fun. That just means that the other functions in their life are probably being fulfilled by something else, or they have had bad experiences in the past in those.
Oh yeah, makes sense. My life has a gaping hole in it that I have to fill with social gaming. So it's how I hang. Oh, you guys are my friends, and you're all over the country. So really, gaming is how I hang out with my friends nowadays.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm a very competitive person. I like because I feel like testing your metal against another human, shaking your hands from across the way and then trying to do something as well as they do, and then even succeeding is like the ultimate test because like you beat a game and so what? But then you play a game against another person and it actually pans out, then it's like, oh, all right, I guess I am really good at this. Whereas before it's like, okay, I can play a game to beat it, but I don't do a lot of competitive things right now. Like I used to play basketball and other things that like constantly, fulfill that need.
Hmm.
And I wonder what my gaming was like back then. I couldn't say because right now memory, I'm gonna pull up
Yeah.
things that are confirming that. But
Right, confirmation bias. But yeah, so that was on our Facebook group. We also got some requests for more Edge of the Empire bonus episodes.
yeah,
Apparently those were pretty popular. A lot of people chimed in wanting that, and it's bad news for me because that means I have a lot more editing to do for the next few episodes. But we give the people what they want.
yeah, yeah. There was quite a bit of activity going on actually, but I guess, man, yeah, there was a ton over the last week. The noteworthy ones I think were the fact that Hearthstone is going to iOS or came to iOS or is coming to, and maybe to Android later. So it's going to be more pervasive than it is now.
Yeah,
Um,
Dishonored is on a free weekend trial, so
yeah, I think
you
is
want to
that
cop
still
that.
going? Okay,
It's till the end of Sunday, so our listeners will miss it. But that's why you should join the Facebook group because you get the up-to-date stuff.
for sure. Yeah, we talked about a couple of things like gaming on a calculator, all kinds of things. So Bloodborne, a new game coming out that's by the Dark Souls folks, but it's in a kind of a Monster Hunter campaign like setting. So that might be fun. I didn't enjoy Dark Souls very much, but I
Mhm.
also didn't really get into it, so maybe that's part of it. Didn't play it a whole lot, but this looks pretty fun because I do love myself some urban fantasy.
Yeah, and Tim found the ultimate Star Wars home theater that I wish I could afford.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Someday when I'm a famous psychologist, I almost said psychology guy, but I don't have to say that. 'Cause
You won't have to.
subjective.
See, your future self is different from your present self, so
Right.
strong future
Someday
tense.
I'll be that guy. But yeah, so yeah, thanks for the feedback. I mean, we had some interactions on the Twitter, but that's because I was stupid and posted something about Ferguson on there, the cop thing, and then yeah, it kind of blew up. I didn't realize that there was like a kind of a political and religious line between people. That apparently there's conservatives are more likely to say like the police officers in Ferguson are doing their job perfectly or at least well, and then it seems like there are liberals who are criticizing how they do it. I didn't even know that.
No, that's yeah. The liberals and conservatives, they both value different things, right? Conservatives will value like stability and a strong like sense of security. Like a conservative is more likely to sacrifice freedom for safety, which is why the post 9/11, like we just went crazy with all these like anti-terrorism acts that were just rushed on through the Bush administration. Like conservatives tend to prefer. It's a question of ideals, right? Like if we could like if I said like I'm tapping your phone, a conservative's more likely to say, well, that's all right, I'm not doing anything illegal, and a liberal's more likely to say, no, even if you could stop a terrorist attack, I don't want you tapping my phone. That's like a basic liberty.
That's weird because it's kind of conflictual. I had honestly thought that because conservatism is about getting the government to be smaller. Why
No,
would
no,
they want the government to have?
not neoconservatism. You're thinking of conservatism pre-Reagan. Like since now it's about small government, except we also want big government because we want to be able to legislate like what kind of birth control you can use and this and this and this. Like it's not. There's no one that's really small government anymore. I guess libertarians, but they're yeah. No, there's of the major two parties, they're both kind of big government-y.
Yeah, I
Just
found
big
myself.
government in different ways.
It's just hilarious. On accident, I found myself noticing that I was allying with like a bunch of libertarians and liberals whenever I was like kind of speaking out against the cops thing, but and I didn't even mean to. I was pissing off people that I was like, what? I'm not I'm not trying to piss anyone off. I didn't know this was a lines thing. I thought this was kind of a clear thing. We don't want people shooting innocent people, and cops having MRAPs, which are mine-resistant armored personnel carriers. You know, they're just massive, like two-story large buildings, like huge vehicles that are impervious to like IEDs, for example. They're really handy in Iraq, you know. But here, I was like, why the fuck would a cop ever need that? There's never been a situation where they've been hit by an RPG. Maybe one time in all of history, I don't know, but there is no reason. It was in Indiana. There was a video of one. I was like, what the fuck? Have they ever had anything? They're like, no, nothing more than small arms fire, and even then, not even a rifle. Why would you need an MRAP? That's absurd.
Yeah.
What happens is, we know in psychology that you hand someone, Stanford Prison Experiment, we talked about that on here.
Right.
If you hand someone a billy club, they use it. If you hand someone a gun, they use it. If you when they handed them those little sheets to put around people's heads, they started using them because it's called functional fixedness. We'll talk about it on another podcast. But once
it's every problem's a nail when you have a hammer.
Exactly, and this is the scientific principle of that, and we know that happens in certain scenarios, and one of them is, you know, the like this situation exactly. It was police versus, you know, non-police, but basically detainees. But they weren't even detainees. They knew they weren't. They were just supposed to be regular citizens that were in the prison. So, no, yeah, it doesn't take much. So giving them assault rifles, of course they're going to start waving them around, which they did. And I was like, oh, Jesus, guys, come on. They're like, oh, we're trained for it. I was like, no, you literally are not trained for it. And then other police guys that are my friends were like, yeah, you're right. They're not trained. We're not trained for it. But still, we should be able to have them. And I'm like, no, you should not.
Right. Yeah. No, it's definitely a conservative versus liberal issue. I mean, that's why Kevin Sorbo was so like on the police side, because he's a very conservative, you know, C-list celebrity.
So weird. I've got friends in law enforcement, and I did not know. I don't know why they were standing against me. I was just like, what the fuck? And they're like, oh, you're stupid. And I was like, I was in Iraq. I think I know how to use a gun and when not to do it. And there's like a whole. The funny thing is, there's a divide between military and law enforcement right now, because the military, like, we didn't even have that kind of stuff. We did like foot patrols in the middle of, you know, like Al Sadar, for example, and never had that. Why would you need that? Like, you know. Anyway, they had more rounds than, you know, we had on a lot of our missions where we expected contact. It's crazy.
Yeah, but it's, you know, they're getting free stuff from the DoD, and you don't. It's like my brother said, you don't want to be the boss that turns down the bulletproof vest and the, you know, all the gear, so, you know, all the new toys to play with. So it ends up happening everywhere. You guys should listen to Dan Carlin's Common Sense podcast. His latest episode addresses this a lot. Like, talks about, you know, why this debate's happening and like the different points of view on it and how we got to this point.
Yeah, well, I would love if somebody's got a podcast out there and wants to bring me on. I will talk about the psychology of this all day, because me, as a developing psychologist, that's horrifying what's going on, and it has nothing to do with conservative or liberal or whatever. I don't care. The point is, I would just talk about what happens when you put certain things in certain people's hands and you make certain things available, and what we know to be true through like a lot of literature. I don't think I can find a single. I would love. That's a challenge. If you know a psychologist, someone who's, you know, savvy with the research, who actually thinks that they should have that, I would love to hear their opinion, because I don't think you could find one. That's stupid. It's overall stupid. It has nothing to do with conservative or liberal politics. But whatever. Diatribe, feedback. Thanks for the feedback, guys.
Yeah. If you want to get involved in this and many other interesting diatribes, you can follow us on Twitter.
Yeah, twitter.com/GameTheoryPod. Had some heated debates on accident on there. Didn't think anybody would disagree. I didn't know that was a thing. Yeah, or Facebook at facebook.com/groups/GameTheoryPodcast.
And please leave us iTunes reviews or Stitcher reviews. Those really help us stay visible. We've got 56 reviews, most of them 5 stars, so we're thankful for those. Apple's algorithms are just ridiculous. I'm not sure how many it's going to take for us to replace the other Game Theory podcast that hasn't put out an episode in over a year and has like 6 reviews. So keep sending them in. Maybe we'll eventually like kick them off the top of the search list.
Yeah, I do not understand their algorithm. It's so weird, but anyway, whatever. Someday. I even sent in an email about it. No response. I was like, hey guys, just letting you know, these people don't update anymore. You know, and I noticed that they have, you know, this many people reviewed, and we've got, you know, quite a bit more. Just wondering if, you know, how that worked. If you could help me understand. Also, you know, if it is a glitch, could you help move it up? Thanks. Any feedback would be appreciated. None. Thanks, Apple. Appreciate that.
Nice work, Apple. So keep sending those in. And
yeah, please do. That's awesome.
Yeah. So anything else?
I don't think so. This is the part where we talk about our next episode, which have we...
Still a question mark.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have
That's
to think.
future Jeremiah and David's problem.
Yeah, we don't have to worry about that.
We have
I
a strong
were-
future tense. We can divorce ourselves from that.
exactly. Um, but other than that, then thanks for tuning in for another episode of the Game Theory Podcast. We really appreciate you listening every week and tuning in and giving us your support and interacting in the Facebook page. That's one of my favorite parts. I love that you guys tune in. I love hearing the feedback, and I love hearing you guys' thoughts on news and then being exposed to things that I didn't know existed, like that Star Wars thing and that kind of thing. People's opinions.
So until next time, I'm David, and I am and will always be your friend.
Ooh, subjunctive. Well done. Yeah, and I'm Jeremiah, and I might be your friend. We'll see. Thanks for tuning in.